May I please have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion and a second to approve tonight, the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Comments to the audience. Please turn off any devices that you have. Refrain from making comments while someone else is speaking, and take any conversations outside in the hallway or lobby. If your comments concern an item on the agenda tonight, you'll have an opportunity to speak during the review of the application. If you have comments on anything not related to an agenda item, please raise your hand, and when called upon, provide your name and Reston address, then proceed with your comments. You have a maximum of 3 minutes. Are there any comments at this time not related to an agenda item? Okay, thank you. We'll start reviewing the agenda items, but first some instructions for affected parties and the audience. The time limit for your discussion is 3 minutes per household. If you're the only member speaking for a recognized group, the time limit is 5 minutes. Please identify yourself, the group you represent, and provide your address before speaking, and you may only speak one person at a time. If we have a lot of folks speaking, usually we have a timer, and they'll help me sort of keep track of that. So just be respectful of everyone's time, and we want everyone to be heard, but we also need to make sure we aren't here till tomorrow. If you have comments and haven't registered as a party, please make sure we should have sign in over there. If you haven't signed in already, please do so, and they'll bring it up when we review the applications. Please direct any comments to the DRB, not to the applicant or affected parties. Please do not repeat what other people have said. If you agree, just say so and state any additional new comments. Please refrain from any abusive or offensive comments. This won't be tolerated and will result in the immediate forfeiture of your remaining time. You'll be asked to leave. If you are not an affected party, again, please sign in. And then I'll call upon you once we get to the application you would like to speak on. All right. Any comments before we get going? All right. We're going to start with a public hearing for the amendments to the design guidelines. They're pretty minor comments, pretty minor revisions, excuse me. So I'll just read this, and then if there's anyone that would like to comment on it or have questions, please let me know. So bear with us here. The Design Review Board is conducting a hearing tonight on recommended amendments to the following design guidelines. A notice has been posted on the RA website for the following changes. For landscaping, planting and structures for condominiums, apartment, common area, recreational and RA property, and commercial public property, and cluster common property. Additional wording added that uniform manufactured modular block systems of uniform color, size, and/or dimensions are not allowed. Definition added: retaining walls, parentheses, any structure used to retain or hold back soil or other landscaping material. If proposed, manufactured block systems, modular segmented, should have a natural look, random pattern that ranges in size and color, and a rusticated appearance that mimics natural stone. Uniform modular blocks are not acceptable. So for clarification, this is something that's come up many times in the past, and it's an effort to provide specific definitions so everyone understands exactly what we're looking for. Second item, B, landscaping, planting, structures for clusters and single-family homes. Definition added: retaining walls, any structure used to retain or hold back soil. Manufactured modular block systems of uniform color, size, and/or dimension are not suitable for residential use. Element added: structural elements, landscape edging higher than 4 inches to be reviewed by staff in consultation with a DRB member or panel of the DRB. Definition added: garden wall, a structure used to provide privacy or separation, such as a brick wall surrounding a rear yard, not a structure used to retain soil. Manufactured modular block systems of uniform color, size, and/or dimension are not allowed. So I'll keep going. Signs for commercial public property, additional wording added. Objective goal: to encourage maximum transparency into retail stores and other establishments with glass as the primary facade element. Limiting visual clutter from the window signage. No application requirement. Additional wording added. Less than 1 square foot is unlighted and no more than 1 visible sign. Definition added. Window and door signage, both temporary and permanent, affixed to the interior or exterior of the glass, readily visible within 24 inches of the interior face of the glass, including all text, logos, symbols, and decorative elements. Additional wording added. The sign is professionally designed, translucent, white. Individual characters are on a clear background. Identifies the address number, name, and hours of operation only. Each character has a maximum height of 4 inches. It is centered or justified on the latching side of the door leaf, and the overall graphic dimension is not more than 100 square inches. Definition added. Temporary window signage, signs, banners, posters, flyers, or any other graphic intended to be viewed from the exterior of the window installed for a period of less than 30 days. So there's a lot of information. If you want to look later, that's also posted on the RA website, so I know this is a lot. Additional wording added. The sign is professionally designed with simple and attractive construction. The font and graphics are compatible with the existing primary signage and only as large as necessary to communicate the sign's purpose. There are a maximum of 2 muted colors consistent with the existing primary signage. It does not exceed 25% of the window glass in which it is installed, and it will not be installed for more than 30 consecutive days or a cumulative total of more than 60 days during a 12-month period. Panel review requirement, additional wording added. Monument signs, text should be limited to general identification of the property/business. Does not include phone numbers, website, or addresses. Window and door signs that do not meet the criteria for quote-unquote no application, additional wording has been added. Signs should be professionally designed, proportionally composed, so basically the same language as above, as we just went through. So I won't read it all, but you can look it up on the website if you'd like. If there are comments or concerns regarding these proposed design guideline edits, please raise your hand and I will call you up to speak. Is there anyone out there that would like to comment? Okay. So hearing no comments, we need to either have a discussion or make a motion regarding the design guideline edits. We could do it one at a time or all at once.
I'll make a motion to approve the design guidelines edits as presented this evening.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Next item on our agenda is Inova Health Services. If you could please come forward, state who you are, and talk about your application.
My name is Lisa Gossard. I'm a project manager with Fairfax County. I'm with the Building Design Branch and with the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services. This is actually for the Reston Temporary Fire Station, and it is on Inova property, which is 1800 Cameron Glen Drive. Okay. So on the agenda tonight, I'm just going to introduce a couple of the design team members that I brought along, and then we'll go ahead and do a quick project overview and then answer any questions that you might have on the project. With me, I've got Christopher Cady, principal with LeMay Erickson Wilcox Architects, and we've got quite a few representatives of our Reston Fire Station and Battalion Chief Bill Betts with our Fire and Rescue Department. Lieutenant Janet Norco is also with the Reston Fire Station 25 and will answer any questions in case Battalion Chief gets called out on a call. So this project, it's only the Reston Temporary Fire Station at this time. As part of the 2015 bond referendum, 5 fire stations were approved by taxpayers to be replaced or renovated. And in this case, Reston Fire Station is scheduled to be replaced on its current site. I've got the preliminary schedule up right now, and the reason we're only talking about the temporary fire station at this time is we're expediting the schedule in hopes that this could be designed, permitted, bid, and then constructed, ready to go when the more detailed replacement facility for the big permanent station is ready to be constructed. And so you'll notice right now we're in design and permitting. That will continue through spring of 2018. We have a current planning commission meeting and a board of supervisors meeting. The first one is in September 14th, 2017, and the board of supervisors meeting is on the 26th, I think. I can't see this far, sorry. That is to review our concurrent PRC plan for the Reston area, as well as the 2232, which we do for all public facilities review. And that would put us right around, hopefully, construction in the summer of 2018 through the winter of 2019, and it would be ready in the spring of 2019, and by that time, the permanent station hopefully will be ready to go under construction. So we're planning on coming before this board and all the other review boards prior to that 3 or 4 months down the road when we've reached a level in design that we can present the permanent station. This is our permanent facility. It's currently located at 1820 Wheelie Avenue, and that's where it will be replaced on the site. We're proposing for the temporary on an over property at 1800 Cameron Glen Drive. The immediate area we looked at for the Reston Fire Station, the first step is the fire station looks at what they call a first due area map, and that determines where in the area in pink is where they can meet the regulations. I believe it's 7 minutes a response call within that area. And determining that, we started looking at all the available sites that we could possibly put this temporary location. The green, you'll notice, is their current location, and the red is where we're proposing this temporary location. And it's well within their first call area. So out of the 36 locations, we looked at county-owned Board of Supervisors sites, vacant properties for lease, any school or park authority-owned properties, anything that could suit the needs. We also looked at them for size and location, and this one we determined met all the criteria. This is views looking north on the site. There's an existing asphalt parking lot. You can see to the north on the left photo is the Fairfax County Health Department building. And there's a grassy area immediately to the north there. On the east, there's Innova's health building that is now currently vacant and is not occupied. Looking to the south, there's a wooded area that is owned by Innova, and right behind that is the new government, Reston government building and police station, and then you can see in the distance, because it's winter with the trees, you can see the town center. And then looking west, you can see I think it's Town Center Parkway, with townhomes and condos on the other side of that, plus the retainage pond for this area. In plan, the conceptual plan, you can see an aerial of the existing building on the right and the matching conceptual plan. This facility is comprised of pre-engineered trailers for the living quarters, the bunk rooms, and then a tent membrane over a steel frame structure for the apparatus bay equipment. There is an existing pavement, asphalt area, and temporary driveway in that we're going to utilize and modify as little as possible. It should only have to be widened slightly to accommodate the parking spaces we need for the fire and rescue staff, and there are some visitor parking spots right there. And this is the exterior elevations. You can see the tent membrane in the lower elevation. The tent membrane has 3 overhead doors. We're proposing that it be a very neutral color. White is the material, and we've submitted, I think, to Margot a sample if you're interested in seeing what they look like. The temporary trailers are a hardy board material, and they will be, again, in very neutral color.
There's some white for you.
Yeah, so pretty standard. There is a ramp, ADA ramp and stairs in the front of the temporary trailers, and then for an emergency egress from the bunks rooms for the fire and rescue staff off to the side. These are actually photos of other fire station projects that we've used a similar style throughout Fairfax County. The bottom picture was recently used at the Herndon renovation project, and the one above that, the smaller one, is more representative of the size that we'll be having at Reston with the 3 apparatus bays. We're not proposing it be green, however. And that was done at the Wolf Trap Fire Station. So when we've used these for most of our recent fire station renovations, Bailey's Crossroads and Lorton Fire Station is scheduled to be soon. We're going to be using a similar version. The Herndon temporary stations are actually being relocated to our Jefferson Fire Station throughout Fairfax County. So I will be happy to entertain any questions you might have on this. And
I had
This is
two quick questions.
Sure.
The generator that you show on the site plan,
Mhm.
does that get tested monthly, weekly? Is it noisy, so on and so forth? We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so it's not that big of an issue, but
It will have some screening, various screening. Is it usually a fence?
Once a week.
There is.
It's tested typically weekly. It's an emergency standby generator, so it will only ever be running during those tests. And in the event of power failure, the station needs to be on.
right. Okay. And second question, was there going to be a flagpole somewhere?
Don't usually do flagpoles
You got to have
at
a
the
flagpole.
temporary, not at the temporaries.
Oh,
Definitely at the permanent. We'll have
all
it,
right.
yes. Mhm.
That's it. All the questions I have.
I guess we want to go around. Ken, anything to?
No questions.
Grace?
No questions, thank you.
No questions.
I think it's a stunning building. Thank you.
If it was permanent, I'd have a lot of questions.
Yes.
Really.
Sorry, Grant?
Same, given that it's temporary and they picked a nice location for it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't have any other issues.
I'll be abstaining from voting on this, but can't resist congratulating my colleague Christopher on his sensitive design here.
Thank you, Mr. Roseberry.
Yeah.
I've got 2 easy ones. What happens to the site after the fire station is gone? Is it be restored back to grass condition, waiting
is.
for their future development?
Yes, all utilities would be brought up. Everything will go back to the previously grass spots.
Does the existing parking lot go away then?
Yes.
It's just all grass then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I noticed there's a fence detail. Is that wood fence only surrounding the generators, or is that surrounding the entire temporary facility?
The fence detail is actually for the trash enclosure.
Trash enclosure only, okay.
Mhm.
That's all I got.
Well, I've seen the fire and rescue department in action a few times, and certainly appreciate all of your efforts. So, side note, thank you very much for what you guys do. You're here. All right.
I'd make a motion to approve as presented with the understanding that it is a temporary facility and that it'd be restored, as we discussed, everything back to the way it was. And given its site location and temporary nature, I recommend approval.
Second that.
Whoever you want.
Fielder's
All in
choice.
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, abstain. All right, item number 2, Tall Oaks Village Center. Please come forward. Thank you very much. Do we have affected parties? I forget, do we have affected parties?
On this, I'm sure.
At a minimum, there's this letter. I suspect there's more.
Ready to grab the list. Would you double check the list?
Is there a list?
No, I just want to make sure we're on this.
Oh, I'm gonna grab the list, but this is the
You ready?
Whenever you are.
Okay.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Looney with Cooley. Appreciate the opportunity to bring to you all this evening updates on Tall Oaks and introduce some additional information and materials to you this evening. I'm going to apologize up front and say that our landscape architect was on a plane that circled Dulles in the thunderstorms that passed through about an hour ago and is en route in a taxi to get here. So we're going to flip the order a little bit of the presentation based on what how we had arranged it before we sent it to you all. And so we're going to start with architecture, and then hopefully by the time we get finished with that, the landscape architect will have arrived and we'll circle back to the landscaping piece of it. Smita Anand with KTGY, who's sitting 2 seats down from me, is going to start off on the landscaping piece, and Marshall Crown, who's sitting at the end, is with Lennar. Lennar is partnering with the Jefferson Apartment Group on the residential piece of this project. They're taking the lead on the design and construction of the residential component of Tall Oaks, and so Marshall and his team are taking the lead on a lot of the design aspects of this, working with the landscape architect and with KTGY. So I'm going to step out of the discussion here and let the professionals talk about what the professionals ought to be talking about and let the lawyers stick to do what lawyers do. But having said that, let me set the context a little bit just to remind the DRB where we are and how we got here. Tall Oaks Village Center, as many of you know, all of you know, is located on Wheelie Avenue at the intersection of North Shore Drive. The property owner came forward several years ago working with Jefferson Apartment Group to pursue a redevelopment of the project. And it was a year ago about this time that both Fairfax County and the Design Review Board gave approval to the general layout and design of the project as represented on the PRC plan that was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2016. Subsequent to that, as you will recall, the 2 commercial buildings that are a component of this project, the existing small retail building that fronts on North Shore along with the multiple-story office building, came back to the DRB for final approval of the architectural adjustments and rehabilitation to those 2 buildings. That work has subsequently been approved by Fairfax County and is underway. So what we are now focused on is dealing with the residential side of the project, because the idea was to transition the retail tenants into those 2 existing structures as an alternate location, which would then allow the owner and Lennar to pursue redevelopment of the original shopping center component of it. Lennar has submitted site plans with Fairfax County for the residential component, and that review process is underway with the county. As you'll recall, it needs to be in substantial conformance with the PRC plan that was approved by the Board of Supervisors, and we're coming back to you tonight to begin to fill in some of the details on various elements associated with that site plan. Specifically, the site plan that is sitting before the county addresses several of the components that remain subject to DRB approval, one of which is the overall landscape plan for the project and the details associated with it. Secondly is the lighting plan that includes the fixtures, a number of fixtures as represented on the site plan submitted to the county. And then thirdly, there are a number of site amenities, both installed as well as kind of architectural elements that need to get addressed and incorporated into the site plan as well. So those three elements are the parts that the landscape architect was going to address, and that are really the focus, I'll say, of the requested approvals from the DRB at this point. Finally, the architectural elevations, Smita is going to introduce to you all tonight, get your feedback based on the direction that we got from the DRB a year ago and from the community, and how they've subsequently responded to that, and then any additional directions that you all need to go. So trying to separate out the site plan related issues that have a corresponding impact on the county's review of the site plan with the architectural elevations of the vertical buildings themselves, so that we're sort of making progress on two different fronts, understanding that they need to go through different approval processes at the county. So as I flip then to the next slide, just to remind you what the existing conditions are, there's a tree buffer that's along Wheelie Avenue as it wraps the corner onto North Shore that's owned and maintained by the Reston Association. There's a pedestrian underpass that goes under North Shore Drive as part of the Blue Trail in the lower portion of the center image. As you round North Shore, there are pedestrian connections along North Shore, along with the entrances to what is today the shopping center, two entrances on North Shore Drive, one closer to the retail and office building, the other kind of halfway down in between the commercial buildings and the intersection with Wheelie Avenue, and then mostly surface parking and a vacant shopping center in the middle. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the commercial components, the exterior of that building, the exterior patios, materials, etc., have all been addressed, but as we'll show you on upcoming slides, the adjustments to the parking lots and kind of the intersection of the residential with the commercial is subject to what we're going to show you this evening. The next slide shows you just a different perspective of those existing conditions. At this point, I will flip ahead in the presentation probably maybe 15 pages and start to get to the architecture, and then we'll circle back to the landscape once the landscape architect gets here. And so I'll turn it over to Smita for her to...
Actually,
You're going to do it?
Sarah's going to
Okay.
start out.
Hi, I'm Sarah Purcell. I'm also with KTTY Architecture and Planning. And so Smita and I, we're going to walk you through the design of the...
You might get a microphone closer.
Hi. Okay. Smita and I are going to both walk you through the design of the architectural elevations for the proposed residential buildings on this site. So as you all might know, there are 4 different housing types proposed for this site. There are 2 multifamily condo buildings, 2/2s, rear load townhomes, and front load townhomes. And before we actually get into the elevation design, I just want to briefly touch on some of our goals and design concepts for this project. So one of our main goals with these schemes was to continue to provide diversity not only in the number of different housing types proposed, but to really give each housing type its own identity while still maintaining a very consistent theme throughout the site. So considering Tall Oaks is one of these 5 so-called village centers in Reston, to be successful, it really needs to start to take on a life of its own while still being able to integrate itself into the larger community. So to create its individual identity, we really feel that the architecture needs to be innovative, and of its time, but still respectful of its surrounding context by taking certain design cues such as scale, materials, and color palette. So in terms of its scale and density, I don't know if you can see the site plan on the corner here, but there's this natural progression that really starts to take place.
I'll go back so we.
Yeah, just so back to scale and density. There's this natural progression that really starts to take place on the site. The multifamily buildings directly relate in their scale and density to the existing assisted living facility. And the commercial buildings as well, which are existing on the site, which are all located inward on the site. And then from there, there's this gradation outward to the adjacent 2/2s, to the front load townhomes, and then finally to the rear load townhomes along the perimeter of the site, which have more of an appropriate relationship to the immediate surrounding neighborhoods. So you'll notice this progression in the elevation designs, with the multifamily condo buildings showcasing more of contemporary and commercial detailing, and then as we move outward towards the perimeter of the site, there's more of a softer design vocabulary that starts to take place, more residential detailing used on the rear load townhomes fronting North Shore. So we can go back to and start on the multifamily condo building. So just to give you just a little briefing on the plan for the condo buildings, the building footprints for both of the buildings, they're approximately 150 by 100 feet. They're podium structure. There's a parking garage actually below grade, roughly 26 units planned for each of the buildings. And so you can see here, the elevations are really treated as one building composition with a very strong defined base, brick base. And through raising and lowering the parapets and roof lines and stepping of the brick base, you really start to see this hierarchy form within the facade, which really starts to define the main building entry and creates varied design opportunities for us to introduce a lot of new materials. The balconies also start to break up the facade and sort of begin this rhythm. We've taken a lot of cues from the neighborhood in terms of the material and color palette. You'll notice the dark casement and transom windows, darker trim and cornice detailing, a lot of use of grays, browns, and wood tones. A lot of the horizontal siding that you see, we're envisioning this as more of a cementitious, like a wood textured siding, which really relates to the surrounding neighborhood. There's also a variation in siding size, color, and texture for added contrast. You can kind of see it. I guess there's no pointer here. Just in terms of the cream colored siding to the darker gray. And this happens on the rear of the building as well. All of these elements are carried throughout the rears and the sides. You'll also notice there's a lot of metal accents and detailing, such as the canopies and metal railings, which are used to tie into the adjacent commercial. So that's where you're seeing some of that more contemporary feel inward on the site. This is the side elevation. And so then moving to the 2/2s, which you can see in the site plan on the corner, are adjacent to the two multifamily condo buildings. So they really start to act as this transitional piece, really, to the more residential townhomes on the perimeter of the site. So these 2/2s, they're 24-foot wide by 50-foot deep. They're 4-story with a stair penthouse leading to the roof terrace. The upper unit has access to the roof terrace. So they start to be broken down to a more residential scale and massing now as we start to, progress outward to the edge of the site. There's a lot more variation within the whole building, so each unit really starts to take on its own identity. We've taken the brick up, only half, 3/4 of the facade, so we can start to introduce additional materials, such as you see the dark blue-gray vertical siding element. Use of bays. We've also introduced more of the wood-toned, textured, horizontal cementitious siding, just for more color and contrast, which all really relate to the surrounding context of the neighborhood. There's a lot of interest created on the facade with the use of like I said before, the bays, the Juliet balconies, and canopies. You'll see a lot of similar commercial detailing elements start to tie together with the multifamily buildings. We've kept the rears and the sides right now. They're pretty neutral in terms of their overall palette and design, complementary of the neighborhood. I will point out here, this was just an oversight on our part, but the penthouse towers that you see behind, they would actually just match the rear siding color and sort of just fade in the background because they are set back from the rear facade. This is showing the side elevation.
So what does that mean on the front of those penthouse units then? Are you changing colors?
Same thing, yes. I apologize. Yes, they would actually match the rear siding color. So on the front, they are set back and more neutral. They would not match those front colors there.
So, moving on to the rear load townhouses, these are 22 feet wide and 16 feet wide townhomes, 40 foot deep. They front onto North Shore and are towards the front entry of the site. These townhomes, their walkways are grouped in pairs so that we wouldn't be having sort of a busy, repetitive walkway penetration of the connection to the sidewalk. These townhomes also occur onto the interior of the site where they both front onto like a mews or a green park. The setback on these townhouses is actually more consistent with the single-family homes that are further, down on North Shore. So we kind of held it back away from the street and the sidewalk, and it's not, up closer to the sidewalk to kind of create an edge. That kind of ties it to the neighborhood homes. As you can notice also that these townhomes are sort of a little softer in vocabulary. They're not that contemporary and commercial in character. We wanted to kind of make it a little bit more upscale, a little more brownstone feeling. The fronts, there's creation of variation and interest on the front with bays that are either low bays tied to the ground or high bays. And again, the color palette that we've chosen is complementary to the other units on the site as well as the residential that's further down on North Shore. These are four-story townhomes, but the fourth level, there's a rooftop terrace towards the front of the site, and the fourth level is pushed back. So what that really does is it creates a three-story sort of massing at eye level, and you don't really perceive the fourth level, which is pushed back. Again, we're using metal canopies, metal railings to tie to the rest of the units on the site, the rest of the typologies on the site. The rears and sides are again very neutral, beiges and grays. On the rears, there's and the sides again. There's a high water table, brick running on the side. And then moving on to the front-loaded townhomes. These are 24-foot wide on the ends on this stick, and then 20-foot wide on the interiors. The 24-foot wide townhomes have a two-car garage, and then the 20-foot interior townhomes have a one-car garage. These are located, as you can see, circled on the site plan towards the rear perimeter of the site. Again, these have terraces, but on these townhomes, the terraces are towards the rear, facing the green tree buffer. So what we actually did on these townhomes is we held the fourth floor habitable space. We held it away from the front by about 4 or 5 feet. So again, to kind of give us that three-story massing on the street. Because if we had had terraces on the rear and we'd held the habitable space all the way to the front, you would have gotten a 4-story sort of monolithic massing. So we wanted to tie it more to the rear load townhouses and have the massing down to 3-story. These sort of are a little bit cleaner, more contemporary, again tying to the 2/2s that are adjacent to it and to the multifamily that are, on the other side of the site. The color palette again is complementary to the proposed 2/2 and multifamilies, and the grays and browns pick up on the single-family homes that are further down on North Shore. We have wood grain accent panels to sort of create some color and contrast in between the windows and to tie to the elements on the surrounding single-family homes. Again, metal accents and metal railings are used on these facades as well to create that uniform, vocabulary throughout the site. As you can see on these windows, on these facades, as well as on the rear load, the windows are, more residential in character, more double hung with the 4/4 grids that, bring it down a little bit more to the residential scale. On the rears, again, we have the terraces on the back, very neutral shades. On the sides, we have a water table, and the front bay that wraps around the side. We do have posted decks on these, whereas on the rear load townhomes, we have cantilever decks. I think that describes it.
Our landscape architect is just 5 or so minutes out. So we could wait
We've
till he
got 2
gets.
hours worth of architectural comments.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, either we could do some comments now, or
Yeah, why don't we do that?
that'd be.
That's okay with you?
Okay.
Ken, do you want, or you want to start?
I don't have anything at the moment, no.
I have a question about the townhouses and the 2/2 units. For the water table, is that wrapped around to the rear elevation or just stops on the sides?
On the
And
2/2,
you have a completely
that's,
different treatment for the rear elevations. Would use, yes, that brick
yeah, so the brick wraps around from the front.
to the
and-
side.
Yeah, and then it steps down, it's a 1 level of brick on the sides.
And it's not on the rear,
There's
so the treatment is not
garage bays
The
on
garage.
on the back side of that.
fully.
But no, it stops at that corner.
Yeah, it stops at the corner.
And for all of them. Okay, thank you. That's the question I have for now.
Bruce, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a better idea, and I apologize if I'm not getting it. On the 2/2s, the structures,
The penthouse?
yeah.
So what, the upper unit comprises the top 2 floors. And so from the upper unit, you can actually go up to the roof level, and part of it, half of it, would be a rooftop terrace for the upper 2 units. And so there's that shows up as that stair tower, just on the uppermost floor.
And you said that's shared by the 2 units?
No, it's only for the upper unit.
Only for that one upper unit?
But it's shared side by side
That's what I
as
was
opposed
thinking,
to
yes,
up and down.
yes. It's
No,
shared.
there would be a privacy wall, parapet wall in between those units, yeah.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, I had a whole bunch of questions. I think as long as we're talking architecture here, I appreciate some design comments that you guys made. Look, I have a whole bunch of questions. I don't know if you want to answer them all or hear them all. Let's talk. And my first question is, I guess I was hoping for a little more variation, and everything on the site now appears to be 4 levels. So there's not a whole lot of modulation in terms of how the buildings look. I mean, every rendering elevation you have are all 4 stories. Let me go through a couple of these, and maybe you can go back and answer some of these so we're not going back and forth. I think some of your attempt at cohesiveness makes some sense. I think the building that keeps coming to mind is the Bizzuto building that's on Sunset Hills right now near Wheelie. And these are mildly reminiscent of that, where there's a whole hodgepodge of color and different panels and materials and lick and stick brick and the Nichiwa stuff or whatever that other material is everybody loves these days. And it's kind of a hodgepodge. And I don't know if these are going to end up looking like that or not. So I want to get to that and see what other comments we have up here in terms of variation and some, when you talk about brick, is it real brick or is it just the lick and stick stuff?
It's
real brick?
It's real masonry brick.
Okay, all right.
No.
Let's look at the
4
multi.
inches deep.
Yes, 4 inches with
4 inches, okay.
with an airspace,
Okay.
behind it.
Okay, so it's real stuff, okay. Let's talk about the multifamily briefly. If you go to will there be rooftop units was one question. So are we gonna see things popping up on the roofs there for rooftop units? I mean, this is a really nice drawing, but what else are we really gonna see?
There will be probably condensers, but this is a 100-foot deep unit, so we will position them right in the middle. And we have raised parapets.
How high?
What you're seeing on the higher parapets are already raised up a couple feet, and then, from there, so.
So basically they'll be invisible just like on this
They
drawing?
they will be invisible from the street.
Okay.
Because they are, there'll be 5
Okay,
on the field.
they'll be there though, so they'll be,
We want to see them at your next visit.
just like see what impact they really will have.
But
The,
do you want to see a street view shed, with these sight lines? Is that kind of what you want to see, or?
I think what I'd like to see is just when you see the elevation, what are you really gonna see?
But
And if
you'll
there's-
never really see it
This-
at this, you'll never.
I understand what you're saying. When
Yeah.
I'm standing on the street, I'm not gonna see them.
Right.
I just like an elevation to show me everything that's really there. And if there's gonna be 4 feet of RTU standing back there, I'd just like to see that so we can then judge, does that make sense, doesn't make sense, and so on, okay? That's all I'm asking. So basically, all right, in the rear elevation of the multifamily, there's an enormous drop in the site. And I want to know how realistic is that? And this goes along with the side elevation. Somewhere on the side elevations of the 2 units, it obviously drops down. Like if you go to the side elevation of that, which is the next one, if the front is to the left, I'm assuming the front's to the left in that picture?
The front is to the.
Left or right?
To the right.
To the right.
Front's
Front's
to the right.
yeah.
Okay, so to get down to the parking, which is underneath this, that drawing really isn't accurate because it's going to slope from the right-hand side all the way down at least a whole level to get to a garage door that I gather is where the driveway is. So there's going to be a garage door below all the 4 levels of window back there that you get into the building. Is that correct?
Well, so it's on a podium, yeah, there has to be, so to some extent, the podium will come out, and then there will be the,
But
the entry.
there'll be
into-
another whole level you're going
Right.
to see on the
Yeah.
left-hand side there that again's not shown in that drawing.
Right,
where you
that is
actually
a
go
very
into the-
generic situation on,
I
because
understand,
there's
but-
4 sides and.
But we're talking,
We-
what's
we
this
can
really
reflect
going to look
that,
like?
yeah.
And again,
Okay.
that's going to drop some 10 feet or so down the side. So there's going to be an angle coming down the side. I'd like to know what that really is going to look like.
Okay.
I mean, the site is not flat, and this indicates everything's flat, everything's the same. It's not. That drops, so you're going to have a 5-story elevation basically at the back, where you have a 4-story in the front because you have to get down to your garage door. I would just like to see that represent that, so we have some idea what's that look like. And both of those buildings come down, there's a garage door to your right, for the right-hand building, there's a garage door to your left. So both of those elevations, I would like to see them show that.
Sure.
That does not show me what that really
Absolutely.
looks like. It's a nice picture, but I would like to see what that looks like. And also in the rear elevation, how much wall goes down to meet grade, and you're currently showing 4 levels. The garage is probably going to be exposed at the back, I'm guessing at that, because of this way the site drops. There's a lot of drop there, so when you look at the rear elevation, there's going to be another whole level there that you're drawing in the rear is not
Right.
showing. And is that just solid brick? What is that? I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there that we're not seeing in these drawings. Okay, just, if you're taking notes of this, that's
Sure,
fine.
yeah, we are.
I think so all of a sudden, we're going to see 5 stories back there. Granted, it's facing the woods, but I'd like to know what the building really looks like on the front and the sides and the rear. And these are nice drawings, but they're not really showing us the reality. I'm having a little bit difficulty figuring which is front and which is back. As I recall, when you go back to your site plan, your 2/2s are the lighter beige color. They're in the interior of the
Yeah.
site, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the more purplish colors that run around
Right.
the U shape at the end and the little 2 things.
So what's circled in red are the 2/2s, so they're literally in the middle of the sign.
So what I'm looking at here is which is the front and which is the back, okay?
Oh, they're all
And when I
front.
look at the 2/2s, it appears that where you have the 2 opposing rows of 2/2s, more or less in the center of the site,
Yeah,
their fronts are looking at each other.
yeah, they're on a muse, they're on
Okay,
a
so what is
green.
presented to the street and to the townhouses across from it is the rear elevation of those units, which,
That's an alley, yeah.
It's rears
what's an
facing
alley?
rears.
So it's
Every-
rears facing rear, so that's an alley. Let me just go back. to
Rears
this.
face the rears on the interior streets.
okay, that's kind of what I'm worried about here a little bit.
They're called alleys.
So that
So.
all of
um,
the, then getting to the rear elevation, so the rear elevations on the townhouses that face North Shore,
Right,
Which, is this the rear?
No, it's
that's the front. That's what I'm trying to, so the rears,
so this is like a green.
Right,
fronts
right, I
facing
understand
fronts, and these are rears facing rear, so this is
Okay.
really an alley.
I just think my general comment would be,
That's-
Makes sense.
buildings like this that are surrounded by traffic, neighbors and everything else, I think you need to spend a little more time not making the rear look so much like the rear. And I think the rears here are pretty bland and don't have near the attention to detail that your fronts have.
Okay.
And these are going to be very visually prevalent for anybody in this neighborhood, because you're going to be walking up down these little streets. The fronts are all pretty well hidden, okay? And that's a concern, so that you're looking at something that looks nicer. It doesn't look like, oh, that's the back of the building, that's the garage. No one really cares because no one's going to see it. Well, everyone that lives here
Right.
is going to see the rear. When I come in the little street that comes down there, both sides are the rear, and that's not the most attractive side of your design. So I would just suggest you may take a little time looking at that as kind of an issue. You spend so much time designing this nice little park in the middle, but then everywhere anybody walks, you're just looking at the rear end of these buildings that are, not selling any shoes, as they say. And the side elevation of the 202s is probably the bleakest elevation I see, and I think that needs some help. There you go. That was sort of mildly ill-conceived. I think you needed to spend a little time looking at that and seeing what you can do. I mean, it comes around the corner. I mean, when you think about this, the beige siding, is that siding the beige color they're siding?
Yes.
On the end unit, the rear is the beige siding, and then when it turns the corner, it's all that beige siding. And I think that's going to be an awful lot of beige siding with all the interest on the front, which no one can see anyway because it looks the other direction, or it looks onto the internal part.
Right.
So as I come into the site, I'm going to see a lot of beige siding there, and that's not the strongest part of your design. So I would take a look at that and see if there's something you can do to make that work a little bit better.
Okay.
The townhouses, I like your elevations there. I think the ones that are facing the street, particularly with the variation in the back and forth that we're talking about, and the stepping, I think that makes some sense. But again, the rear-loaded, the 4-story elevations of those, the 3-story looks fine. The 4-story, again, everything internal in the site's all 4 stories. And that bothers me because there's no variation. I don't know what you can do, but we did some townhouses over in Alexandria, and we took the elevated part, and in some places moved it to the front, some places moved it to the back, so that it kind of alternated. So if you had a roof deck on one, he was against a solid wall the next one. There might be things you can do with that, so everything internal isn't all 4 stories. It's just going to seem like 4-story land in there. Everything's going to look the same. And all we're seeing when I walk down the little streets are the rear ends of all these buildings. It's not the best presentation of your building, so I would take a look at that as well. But the rear end of the townhouses are almost as bland as the rear elevations of the 2/2s. The front-loaded townhouses, I think, are okay, but again, you go to the, turning the corner with a lot of beige siding. So around the end, the fronts have the garage on them, I gather. Just which way are they facing and which way aren't they? I'm still working with that. But I guess the ones that are on the outside
Right.
of the U shape, the face with the garage is always facing into the street.
Correct.
And the back looks like these rather sort of bland things with the double level decks and all this kind
Right.
of stuff. So like the 4 stories that are looking at the woods have a deck on the first floor and a deck on the top floor. Is that right? Okay.
Right.
And that's just looking at the woods?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I wish there was a little more interest there. It's like, and I know these things are budget driven, but if you have, you're spending all your money on the front, and then if I live in that house, I really would rather see a little more interest on the back. Instead of, oh, well, we cheaped out here, we put the brick on the front, it's all vinyl siding on the back, or whatever it is. I think you got a really good start on this. I'd
It's
just like
going to be
see it.
cementitious, we're not doing vinyl anywhere
I'm
on this.
kidding about the vinyl, I don't know
Oh.
what it's made out of, but we'll see your samples, I
Right.
think, at some point here.
Yeah.
But I think just a little more attention so they're not so much front and back, particularly because the back elevations are so prevalent in all of this. It's all you're going to see unless I go in there and I walk out my front door and look at my front doors across. That's nice, but then everything else is all back, rear end, you know. So some of that I would see if we can get more accurate with what the grade is really doing to these buildings.
Right.
Particularly when you go like down to the parking lots, that's a 10-foot difference front to back at least, just to get down to the parking. What does the rear elevation of the multifamily and the townhouses, I don't know how that affects the grade when it drops off. At one point, I'm trying to remember, when we first started talking about this, there was something like a 40-foot drop from one end of the site to the other. Is that still correct? I mean, it's not, we're not flattening out the whole site. There's going to be some serious grading issues that maybe your landscape architect can relate to, but when everything looks flat in all your drawings, it's not quite what it's really going to look like. So I guess that's where I'm going with this, is I'd like to see what it's really going to look like. That's all I got for now.
That's it?
I'm done.
That's all?
For now.
So the only thing I would add, I had the similar concerns, I'll admittedly not as thorough as Richard's about the faces, the various faces and the level of detail that's being applied to them. On the front-loaded rear elevations, seems to be the only elevations where the composition of the windows have just sort of taken on a life of their own. I assume that's driven by what's going on in the interiors, but in every
Front
other.
load?
It would be slide 31, next slide. So the relationships of windows vertically start to shift all over the place, which is not something you see in any of the other elevations, with the exception of maybe some of the side elevations. So I was curious about that. I'm assuming it's because of what's going on.
It's driven by the layout and it's driven by the plan. We can take a look at it again and see if we can line things up a little bit more.
Yeah, they just, I mean, you can see on those end units in particular, they're just kind of all over the place, which presumably you have some of the same struggles on the front, but somehow you've resolved that. So I think that's the only thing I would add to Richard's comments.
Thank you. Neil?
So these 4-story units with the 4th floor setback, and I like to speak in 2 microphones at once for the lovely feedback I can make happen.
Turn mine off.
You know, you see that at West Market over at Town Center, and I think it's a real folly to think that you don't see that 4th story, because you certainly see it on the ends of the buildings. And I don't think it's so different from the earlier discussion about rooftop equipment on the multifamily building. You can see these things at certain points, and we want true elevation drawings. So if it was confusing about what we meant when we said we want to see what shows, we want to see the elevation so that we can decide what shows.
Okay.
And not have you interpret for us what maybe we can or can't see. I think you've done a really good job of picking up on the idea of the color palette. I think that the massing variation is generally really good. I found it interesting to hear you speak about your intentionality in moving from the more contemporary multifamily building to the more traditional looking brownstones. It was the first thing I questioned. To me, as I turn onto North Shore Drive off of Wheelie into this new Tall Oaks Village Center environment, I feel a little disappointed to see brownstones. I kind of would want to see personally something that's Reston in a contemporary way. That said, they're nice looking brownstones. I just wonder what they're doing there in the year 20, whatever we get these built. To my eye, the multifamily building is actually the more current. It's simpler, it doesn't have as much detail. I know that it's not the same product as a townhouse, but this is where it gets into concepts and what it is we're trying to do with these village centers. Having a little piece of West Market come over to Tall Oaks doesn't quite feel right to me.
There you go.
So just put that out there. The end elevations, I was on that too, and I just want to amplify what Richard said there. I think we're missing an opportunity, and I think they are going to be very visible as you enter the site. And I think the end units are special because they've got the opportunity for windows, but at the same time, we'd like to see a composed elevation. And it's not that right now. It's kind of like you've just cut the sausage at that point and exposed what's on the inside. But, it's a real opportunity, and I think it's a difficult elevation because you've got all of those front and back materials and front and back massing to resolve, but you should work at it and try to resolve it a little more. The details, and I know this is, I'm assuming this is fairly conceptual at this point, the front-loaded townhouses are the only ones that show downspouts, and I don't like the kink in the downspout from the leader box at the top. It would be nice if this were built in a way where you could just have the downspouts running cleanly straight down the building instead of every single one of them having to have a 45-degree kink as soon as it comes through the parapet. I'm wondering if there are going to be railings at these rooftop terraces, because I don't think your parapets are high enough to not have railings. So we want to see that if they are going to be there. The details in general are yet to really be seen in terms of the metal canopies on the multifamily building. They're really hard to even tell what you're showing in this drawing because it's rendered out to the point where you can't really tell the depth, and it doesn't show inside elevations but so well either. What are the railings going to be? It strikes me that a lot of the desired quality in this really could come out in the railings, the light fixtures, the garage doors on the units that have garages, the canopy details, the struts for the canopies. If all of that's done really well, this could take it to another level, and if it's not done so well, then it just really looks contrived and not very good. So side elevations may be one of the biggest comments, and then just, we're ready to see actual elevations. I think it's probably good though to come in and show conceptually what you're thinking before we get to actual elevations. Just one last hit on maybe going more contemporary with some of this. The little kind of like cornice dentils and stuff on the brownstones, the soldier courses. Soldier courses don't typically run past the edges of the windows. I find that to look a little bit hackneyed. I think if it's a precast lintel, it can run past the edges of the windows, but the rowlocks and the soldier courses, to me that looks like an untrained person doing a rowlock or a soldier course detail. They typically would stop at the edges of windows. And then again, I just questioned going with something as historicist as the little dental blocks up in the cornice. I think I just really don't see that. So if I was giving you some, we're only presented with what you've presented, and so that's all that we can react to. But if I had my druthers, I'd see something a little more contemporary. And just also echo the back elevations, the same as the side elevations. The 2/2 rear elevations are somewhat composed, but Graham found the one that was less composed, the front-loaded rear elevations. And dropping out the brick, all of that. I think the developer, to me, took on composing four sides of a building when we committed to this PRC, because you see it all. Thank you.
I don't have anything new to add to that. I was going to say my big picture items though are the side elevations as you come in that western entrance. I think that's a great opportunity to dress this up. And then the rear elevations of the 2/2s facing multifamily units needs to kind of have more consistency as you face that. But I'd echo everything that's been said before me.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of the comments also. The multifamily was okay to me. The 2/2 just seemed real busy, even the front elevation. Seemed like you had too much going on and maybe too many materials. Totally agree on the rear and side. Definitely need some work on those. So definitely a lot of good comments we heard so far on those. The towns on that front, that fourth floor kind of sticking up, that sort of gray color to me didn't seem to sort of match with what you were trying to do there. Maybe you're trying to blend with the rear, but I also agree on the rears and the sides that there's too much of that color. So I personally didn't really like the way that color looked on the fourth floor back there. Definitely don't like the way the rears are done. Sides are plain, and then Richard touched on the parking garage, but I think that's a really important component of this. How does that all look when you go into the parking garage? So I think we'd want to understand that, how that looks and feels, and where are we going to see the parking garage on the other elevations, and where's your venting and windows and things like that as it relates to the outside. And if you're going to have any major mechanical equipment related to the parking garage or anything else, we'd definitely want to understand where that's going and how that's being shielded and softened. But obviously a lot of good comments. So some of the elevations look really nice, but just needs work. So thank you.
I just had one more question. Has the unit count changed since we last saw it?
I have one question too on the townhouses front-loaded front elevation. Is that? Okay, the drawing I have here looks like there are little canopies over on the far left hand. Are there little canopies over those windows on the first floor, just above the garage?
Yeah, that's.
Looks like there's something
Yeah,
there.
they are canopies. There's a little Juliet balcony over the doors, and then there's just a.
Okay, no, I like the elements, just that then when you see the front-loaded side elevation, there's nothing shown sticking out there. And those are sticking out, I gather?
Yeah, the side elevation is really focusing just on the side. We're really not showing.
Okay, but
things-
right above where that the first
Right.
floor window is, there would be like a little flat roof sticking out there?
There would be,
And
yeah,
a
there
little
would be
balcony sticking out there?
Things beyond, yeah.
You've got
Okay.
the same interns working in your office that I have working in mine.
Yeah, but those are the kind of things that we'd like to see too, so we can see what that really does look like. And if there are
Yeah.
balconies sticking out there, it would be nice to see them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Would you like to present the landscape architecture?
Also, one last comment on that. On the rear elevations, you showed 2 levels of balconies, but the side elevation, I guess one is recessed, or where else?
Yeah, one's a
Oh,
rooftop.
that's up here.
One's a
Okay, got it.
rooftop, yeah.
Okay, but there's a railing up there that doesn't show here. Okay.
Going to introduce yourself and
Yes, sir.
where you go.
Bruno Cavallo with CGLA. I've been representing to many of you years back when we were doing the Lake Ann redevelopment plan. Funny enough, just today, a friend of mine sent an article from the patch showing that Lake Ann has now been placed in the historic register. So I guess the whole debate about will the bank building stay or go, I guess it's been resolved, right? Well, we shall see. You start by saying that not much has changed from the PRC plan regarding the layout of the site or the open spaces. And what we've done, obviously, since is refine some of the spaces and materials in accordance with the development process. Does this have a pointer?
It won't work on the TV.
Right. We'll just go briefly through the main areas. There are 4 main spaces. The entry plaza to the east along North Shore, then the central green just west of that, the linear green, and then the connection to the tunnel and the trail system with the exercise stations on the south end of the site, all connected through a pedestrian walkway. Tree preservation, as you may or may not remember from PRC plans, is a critical element, and we've spent a lot of time with UFA making sure we can save as many of the adjacent trees as possible to blend back into the buffer along Wheelie and along North Shore. And this just gets into what some of the tree elements, tree species that we're putting back into the site in terms of their category, Fairfax County, canopy, and so forth. A lighting plan, just again making sure that pedestrians feel comfortable. Even at nighttime, walking through the site, everything will be LED and 100% cutoff. And just some character images of the open space, with the top left being a shot of the entry plaza on the bottom left there, and then the main green just underneath that, the main green looking at the fountain element, which right now we're working with IPAR on, beginning the process rather with IPAR on the public sculpture that's going to be in the open green area there to the left, and then the fountain element. And you can see some of these shots. This is the entry plaza with the 3B being the sculpture, and then opening up into an open lawn so that you get a nice view into the site. You have some topography. You're higher up at the North Shore elevation, and you gradually slope down further west into the site. You see the Central Plaza area, again taking opportunity of that grade drop and having, you can see the section on the right side there, the amphitheater type of outdoor seating with just very passive type of landscape. A stone patio area, the fountain element as a background and also as a center point, a playground element just to the south, so it's abutting that space, and then the linear green area projecting north-south. It's a really welcoming element into the site from North Shore. Some of the hardscape elements that we are contemplating now, and the colors as well. So earth tones mixed in with some grays, some fieldstone accent areas, integral colored concrete for the majority of the sidewalks. Maybe some fieldstone veneer with precast caps for the seat walls, and the plankstone pavers for that main promenade area. So you can see some of that tying back to the building colors and giving an overall palette for the design. Some of the site feature elements, fairly modern. We do have a bus shelter for the ribs, that entry plaza. Then the playground, again, working closely with Fairfax County Parks on this natural theme concept, and that's something that we want to project throughout the design, is the sort of the natural quality of the site, how the paths and the new trees will sort of blend into the existing trees, the existing paths, and the whole site takes on a more natural quality throughout. And that goes down to, the playground elements. The linear green, nice north-south pedestrian connection. And everything native, again, focusing on the natural quality of the site. And then the connection along North Shore, you can see right there, the tunnel entrance, and we'll open that up a little bit, lighten it, add a little bit more character to it, and then that will connect east to the corner of Wheelie and North Shore. And you can see there. And, we talked about, there was a mention about how the grade's working. You can see, my green thing before it disappeared, you can see the retaining wall on the south side of that stick of townhomes. About a 12-foot wall. We haven't contemplated on the exact veneer of that wall yet. Maybe a block wall or a port-in-place wall with some sort of veneer. But it's a substantial element that will provide a hard edge along the path. Then the path itself is well lit with LED lighting, and it's going to have on its south end 3 of the 6 overall exercise stations. And you can see on the bottom of the page there some of the characteristics of the exercise station, although we're looking at a little bit more modern looking at fitness elements. Also, at least 3 of the stations will be geared more towards the 55 plus crowd. We'll also have some stretching stations, and the paving will be concrete, not sand or anything like that. Anybody have any questions?
Should we start with you this time?
Sure, I got a few comments and questions. So I like the natural wood look of the fitness stations and the personal images, so I'd encourage you to stick with something similar to that moving forward. I think it complements the area better than something maybe a little more contemporary.
Sure.
Playground materials and design is nice as well. I think that does a good job complementing that area. I think moving forward, definitely want to see more detail on the planting plan as far as shrub species and native species. I know there was a commitment to that in the PRC landscape plan. So
you can see a lot more detail, in the actual handouts than you can up here. But everything is native or adaptive.
Do you have the landscape? Did you include the landscape schedule with this? I think I saw
Yes,
something,
there
but
is.
I don't know if it was
I
just
think it just has
generally
the
colored.
minimum county
Mhm.
trees on it, but it might be nice to have there's a lot of commitments to shrubs and ground cover throughout the center.
Correct. We didn't get into the shrub, the understory quite yet, but we're certainly committed for the PRC to do all native adaptive.
Sure, I think we need to see that moving forward on this. I had a question about the crosswalks. Are they raised crosswalks, decorative? Are they standard?
Decorative.
And will those materials match the architecture of the...
Correct. And my fault for not putting that particular material on there, but I would imagine it would be the same color palette as that promenade paver or something similar to that, that earth tone.
So complementary to the architecture of the town.
Correct, absolutely.
The fountain element, is that going to be a play feature or more of an art piece that's in that plaza?
More of an art piece just because of the health code issues related to the interactive fountain. And, size-wise, it's not very large. So I think it'll just be a nice backdrop, have a seawall around it, maybe incorporate, and that's what we're talking with IPAR now, is incorporate maybe some kind of public art element with it.
Sure.
So it's an iconic piece.
That kind of ties to my last question. Is there an opportunity to incorporate any of the IPAR bike rack designs into the site? And
Sure.
some small areas, I think that'd be worth reaching
Yeah,
out
I
to,
mean, we do have several areas that were designated bike racks, and right now we have a catalog bike rack that's more contemporary, but we can certainly,
I know they had some designs they presented to the community, and
Yes.
that might be worth
yeah, those are cool.
incorporating here.
Great, thanks. Neil, any comments?
We spent a lot of time back when this first came through trying to get more tree buffer along North Shore Drive, is my recollection at least. And I think the townhouses even moved back and staggered some. Reston doesn't really have a street tree per se, but I would not want that to be so many different species and such along North Shore Drive that we lose the sense of deciduous trees that I think Reston is known for. And it is Tall Oaks Village Center after all. So
Tall red oaks.
I want some tall oaks along North Shore Drive.
Yeah.
Two claps this evening, folks. 2 claps. Okay, thank you.
We have it in our packet about the lighting, but can you just touch on sort of the lighting strategy in general, some broad brush?
Sure.
Looks like you have 2 different types.
Correct, and they both look similar, just different sizes of the same. So there's the fixture there. So one is a little larger and a little higher for more of the roadway out, and the other one is shorter, I think at a 12-foot mounting height, a little smaller fixture for the pedestrians. And they're all LEDs, they're all cutoffs, so they work with the dark sky regulations.
Just to continue, is that also along the path? Under
Correct,
the
yeah.
tunnel?
So let me show you that.
So I think this may be the best.
Yeah. So the darker lines are I keep thinking this pointer is going to do anything.
You can get up there and walk.
Yeah, could do that, man.
Do you know what the values are? I can't read any of this stuff on this.
This is my
Well,
microphone.
like 1.5 and 6 is the highest. I mean, it's all very,
Clip on.
Yeah, you don't have to clip it either.
somewhere it's all.
So the shorter poles along the path, right?
On that thing down.
And then the taller poles, which are about 18 to 20 foot mounting height, are along the roads. And, given the technology that we have now, it's really easy to control the light and where it projects. So, spillage and things like that can be controlled. But, obviously, too, dealing with lead, it doesn't allow you to spill beyond the site anyways.
So there's nothing going on along the trail
I knew that.
that goes under North Shore?
There is along here, but yeah, once you get into here, we've not explored lighting that piece. Is
So
it?
it's the same
Isn't it
style?
lit now?
Is that what you're saying?
Where are we talking?
Are we lighting underneath North Shore?
Not underneath?
Here, oh, this is the same style, yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And this has been, we've added 2 additional lights here to really light that entryway into the tunnel. But again, it's all cut off, so you don't get the spillage back into that stick of row homes.
Bruno, I'm going to go back one slide because
The different heights.
the different heights.
The orange meaning the lower light, the pedestrian, and then the blue, the taller. I think it's 14 and 20.
I don't have anything more.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, comments, whatever. If you go back to, I like the fact you numbered these sheets. It makes it easier for us. If you go to your sheet 12, there. Just one comment on the upper left-hand corner. when we were talking about architecture, this is more to the architecture than to
Right.
the landscaping, but it's real obvious from the upper left-hand corner how cavernous everything being 4 stories is going to end up looking. And that was one of my concerns, and even in that rendering, the 4 stories facing 4 stories with no break, that concerns me. General comment there, I think it would be real helpful overall for both architects, landscape, whoever. In the landscape, you guys tried to show some of the grade changes here,
Correct.
but a cross-section through the whole site running east to west and one running north to south would really help us understand that, and you perhaps too, there really isn't a flat site, and that would just be beneficial. And the comments from our letter of, what was it, 1967 when we first started this? One of the things, and Neil touched on this, one of our points was that the front elevations and yards of the townhouses adjacent to North Shore have a natural appearance without fences and defined front yards. If you go to your slide number 19, that doesn't look very natural to me. And I think what we were looking for was more of retaining a natural tree buffer like everywhere else in Reston. This would be the only place in Reston that all of a sudden townhouses absolutely just front on the street. And I think what our indication back in whatever that date was, have a natural appearance, is to keep that in mind. Those look a lot like front yards to me, with grass that some poor guy is going to have to mow all the time. And the end unit is going to have more yard than anybody, and he's not going to be happy about that, even if the cluster pays for it. But I think you got to work on that a little bit to where you go back to the natural appearance we've been looking for.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was a strong comment that was made.
Yeah,
Bring back the oaks, make it more natural.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And I think let's see here.
Can I just add to what you just said, Richard?
Yeah.
The date on that was May 24th, 2014. And there's additional comments that additional non-invasive vegetation in a natural configuration be installed along North Shore between the southwest row of townhouses facing the street and the street to provide screening of those townhomes and a continuous substantial tree buffer along North Shore. And then the next comment is the one you just read. So I think we had a lot of comments along that, that section of the road.
That's kind of what we're looking for. Okay. I think your common area, the Central Plaza, it's kind of a quirky concept, and I think it's okay in terms of it being interesting, but I think let's see, where are you, number 14? Number 14. The right-hand side of your triangle with the auditorium or amphitheater there, I don't quite understand that one short leg that runs out and runs into the parked cars of the brown color. Is that just connected to another sidewalk? I don't quite understand what that's.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk that runs on along
in front of the car parking?
Yeah, correct. So
And recall with the commercial building, I'll call it the white area was appended to the commercial
Right.
building to go to the second story, and there's the elevated patio that sits directly outside of that for outdoor dining, and that sidewalk kind of leads to that entry
Okay.
into the.
So it's not a level change, it's just a
Correct.
material change?
Correct.
Okay.
There is a level change as you go towards the stairwell, because it goes up into the entry to the office building, and then, if memory serves me correctly, it goes up into the office building or up into the elevated patio dining area.
yes, correct.
And on the, let's see, your number 20, is that the walkway that runs down behind the front of the townhouses, because they're facing the, no, I'm sorry, those are actually facing the street in front.
Yeah.
So that's the back elevations. Is that a retaining wall that's running
Yes.
all the way around there, and how high is that? And what's
Look
that
at the
made of?
if you look at the section on the right of the page, you see the wall, about a 12-foot wall at its highest.
So that walkway is 12 feet below. See, that's where a section would really help. That's a huge drop.
There's a section right there.
No, I see, yeah.
You're saying through the whole property.
Yes.
Well, yeah, through the whole property, but
Yeah.
like I hadn't
No,
picked
I
that
got
up,
that.
and I hadn't looked at this drawing before, but that section through the whole property, east to west, we would have picked that up. But people walking on that path, are down in a hole, really. The townhouses are 12 feet up in the air above them there. So speaking of cavernous, that's really a 4-story elevation at townhouse plus another 12 feet of wall.
Well, it's on the, it's
That's-
only on the north side. I get your point.
I think it does that now to some
It's not
degree.
level, but
I don't care, I want it better.
No, but it's because of the
I
underpass.
understand, I understand.
I mean, the right-hand picture there, we struggled with this during the PRC planning process, was, how do you make up that grade as it goes down into the underpass?
Hmm.
And we didn't want to drop the units down to that level because it presents a safety question because they're right up against it. And
Right.
you have to be able to maintain the clear zone to get into the underpass. So we struggled with this and spent a lot of time, even during the PRC plan, about how that area ought to be treated. So we're recognizing.
Okay,
that
so there's gonna be a
that
12-foot,
wall needs to be addressed.
okay, so it'll be a 12-foot high wall. I gather, if you look real closely, there's a railing on top of it. And that will match all the railings everywhere else in the
42
house. Is
inch, yeah.
that the idea?
I mean, the one thing we can start doing is looking at a little landscape buffer between the path and the wall. Soften it up, it's,
Yeah, I'm not sure what you could put there, but, or who's gonna maintain it, but yeah. Because the
same
path there,
you're gonna
is-
maintain the residence.
I mean, the path you're showing as being 12 feet wide, yeah, you could take a little bit of path and plant ivy or something. Oop, sorry, can't plant that here. Never mind. So there is a railing there.
You don't plant it, it just grows.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Well, like trumpet vine, it just grows.
I think those are the only questions I had right now. But emphasis on the North Shore Drive being more natural, I think that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest comments here. Bruce?
At the risk of piling on, that was the thing that struck me when I saw the plan, the North Shore.
North Shore, yeah.
So you've heard it, so there's no mistake about that. That was my primary comment.
Yes.
Grace?
I would repeat the same comments regarding North Shore Drive. And again, just softening the appearance, trying to soften the appearance of the buildings. If we go to number 12 and versus number 9, I'm looking at the outdoor space. But then if you look at the townhouses, I don't necessarily think that the vegetation is reflective of what's on the plans. It may be somewhat challenging for the rear, the townhouses that are rear loading, to add additional landscape in there. But it's just a matter of just trying to soften the rear
Yes.
elevations of those
Yeah, obviously,
townhomes.
it's very hard to plant trees back there.
So it is challenging, so just to minimize it looking like an island surrounded by paved areas. So that would be my comment there. I like the play equipment that's proposed, but I was seeing how it could be more similar, I mean, that natural aspect could be more similar to the site furniture. The site furniture looks to me more modern. Some of the site furniture elements that you have there look a little bit more modern. So I'd want them to look a little bit more natural
That's a very good comment.
with the playground equipment. You already answered my question about the lighting styles, and I'm looking forward to seeing the elevations on the landscape.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, I'll just add my comments as well about the North Shore. I think it's covered, I think you have that. A couple of other things. If you go to slide 6, I think that's a good place to just highlight. Looking at the neighbors, the cluster over on the right-hand side, I see basically a line of demarcation of the new property versus existing property, and I'm assuming there's going to be a way to soften, or I know that's pretty much a parking lot and a sidewalk, but are you taking any vegetation away there? Are you aware, or is that existing?
Those trees you see there are existing to remain.
It truly looks like a line of demarcation there, and I just don't know how to remedy that.
Yeah,
it's
but
quite
that's a good
noticeable.
point. Yeah, it's very noticeable, you're right.
And then the
Might be a
same,
fence there too between the property.
the other neighbor would be the
Right.
I think that's pretty flat for them. I suspect there will be some neighborly opportunity to allow those folks to wander over and take advantage of the common areas for if there's like a little concert or something like that. Just wanted to make sure that there's a connectivity or access to your neighbors. And I know that might be outside of the boundary, but I would ask to just take that into consideration, that they may want to partake in some of the activities in that common area. And then the last thing.
Ken, on that point, we actually, I don't know whether they're here or not tonight, we actually coordinated with them.
Great.
The PRC plan process, and even as I recall, maybe the commercial building redos about, we had proposed some changes to their parking lots because we were concerned about sort of their parking spaces just end, and then you pick up with a curb line that picks up
That's what I
what
was
happens
concerned about.
everywhere else. And we offered to reconfigure their surface parking lot, take the landscape islands that are in the middle and push them to the end so that there was a transition. And they declined our willingness to do it because, as we understood it, their residents said, we like being able to look out and see that landscape island and put the tree in it.
Fair enough.
So we've been down that path and ended up where we are because of that.
Sounds fine. The last point, and I think I just wanted to bring it up, see if that conversation had taken place. And it may be too late, but I look at the pathway entrances, especially, I see a lot of effort has gone in the area around the underpass, and it looks like that's going to be a great effort on the new site. But if I'm walking on that path, I feel like I'm sort of going from a well-lit area to a very dark area. And I don't know if there's any opportunity, and if it's not, I'm just bringing this up as a suggestion, to tie some additional lighting into, say, and you'd have to work with Reston, I believe, on this to see if they'd want to do it. But I have two areas. One is maybe a little bit of lighting on the other side of the tunnel, because I think you're going to go from very dark to very bright, and I don't know if that causes any kind of safety issue. So I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion. And then at the upper portion of that photo, the pathway going down to Wheelie Avenue, which is where some folks might want to catch a bus or whatever. Is there an opportunity to work with Reston to get a little lighting on that path? Because there may be some people that want to use that path to the Wheelie Station. Just a suggestion. It may be too late, but I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay, thank you. I just had a couple of additional comments. As we were talking about the different architectural styles and the different modern elements here, I think one thing you might want to do for, sounds like the next submittal, is just make sure that we're blending the two styles and making sure they work together, the landscape architecture and the final architecture. Seems like some of them are conflicting slightly, so just think through that. And some of the pictures had white stone in them. White stone is not allowed, so I wouldn't put white stone in the beds. So,
Yep.
just comment on that. I think it's just a
Say that again? The stump, what?
no white stone.
Oh, yeah. We'll do that.
So that was in your pictures. So I think it was just a reference picture. I just wanted to make a comment that not to provide that.
Yeah, that would never happen.
Those are my final comments.
I would just add that please do go back and, with the help of Mark, review the comments from 3 or 4 years ago. We don't want to be the ones that are having to find that stuff. I'm a little surprised that the North Shore Drive stuff wasn't considered, because that was talked about extensively.
Kind of one more thing too, to revisit the lighting. I'm looking at the light fixture provided. I don't feel like it really complements the architecture and the lighting that'll be on the building. So, work with the architect and make sure the site lighting, I think, needs to be a little more complementary with the final architecture. It seems like a very different fixture with different lines than what the architecture is providing.
Okay. I believe we have some affected parties. Before we do that, do you want to add anything or?
Can I just ask a couple of clarifying questions in terms of final approvals and levels of detail that we need to provide? like probably the best example I have is on the playground equipment and the structures that go in there. Some of that, if it's from natural materials, can be created by the person who creates it, and it's not something that we necessarily can control the final product in terms of the shape and color and other things associated with it. How much flexibility do we have to kind of select those materials as we're ready to install them without coming back here if we're staying true to this concept in terms of the natural materials and equipment that go in there? Obviously, fencing and other things we can come back and talk about, but I'm just thinking ahead to some of those natural features and the way, the netting, let's say if you build the stone structure and the netting that goes in there, whether it's 2-inch gauge or 4-inch gauge, do you care? I guess is my question.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think it probably depends on how much it varies and what it looks like. I think if it's
Great answer.
Similar to, great question, great answer. It depends, right? And I think it's going to depend on how much you vary from what you're presenting, and what we finally vote on. So,
or maybe said another way, part of what we're trying to do, as I mentioned at the beginning, is get the site plan pushing its way through the county. And there's certain, we put a planting schedule in the county site plan that says we'll select from among the following. And then you get into the actual installation of it, and you're selecting from the following. But
the county gets very involved.
Understood, but there's still some flexibility to swap out some materials or swap out some plants as you get into the installation on site.
I think what we're going with here is showing you all the direction, right? The characteristic of what we want. And I didn't get too much into it. Maybe I can explain. The green versus the beige on that kite-shaped playground. The green are little mounds, artificial turf mounds. So there's some topography there that, again, is supposed to bring out that more natural characteristic. So you're playing not only with these play elements, but also topography. And then the play elements themselves, I was thinking, for the most part, they're from manufacturers. So we're not having to custom make 15 different play structures, but we can work with manufacturers that already are making natural looking elements and create some variations, like that hump bridge in the bottom there. That's a custom element. That's just a variation of a standard element. So things like that, but as long as it fits the overall theme that we want to create, right?
Yeah, I don't think that personally doesn't strike me as something that's going to cause you a problem.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a bunch of red sails and some things that aren't allowed in any of our design guidelines, and that'll be a problem.
Right, and maybe the question I'm really asking is, how much of that do we need to come back a second, third, fourth, fifth time to debate over a log structure versus coming back and talking about the architecture? I'm just trying to understand.
I think if it's reviewable, it's reviewable, and it's got to be reviewed.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to
have
clarify.
To come back to the full board for some of those details. I could see some of the little stuff getting parceled off to a panel.
What I don't want to do is get hung up after the fact, having not.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want you getting hung up after the fact either, because we found out you did something we didn't approve.
From the site standpoint, what I heard, the major point being North Shore, right? That frontage.
But I think for the landscaping there, Mark, you're kind of alluding to that you guys are presenting the minimum county required plantings right now to get through urban forestry, but you're showing a lot more plantings on the illustrative renderings that we were shown. I think we want more detail on what those shrubs and ground covers are going to be.
We can have how about, I don't think we're going to develop like a full planting plan for shrubs, but we can have a palette like with imagery.
Yeah, that you'd pick from moving forward. Right. I think it'd be helpful.
Mark, are you particularly concerned about the playground equipment, or are you using that as an illustrative?
As an example, right? I mean, there's traditional things we know: railings, window treatments, that sort of thing we know has to get your approval before it goes in. What I don't know is, of these types of elements, how far down into the weeds do you want to get?
I think we want to know what you're planning on building. I mean, I don't know how long you're trying to maintain flexibility on before you actually select. At some point, so you have to choose something to install, right? So,
Yeah, I think generally what the stuff you're showing here, I don't think is going to be a problem if it stays in the same vocabulary. I think just to say, repeat again what you were talking about, from 3 years ago, May of 2014, our interest has always been to try to keep North Shore looking more Reston-like, a more natural buffer. That's what we've been saying forever, and not look like the townhouses on Market Street or wherever the heck these houses are, and that's what they look like now. So I think that's, please pay attention to that.
Yep.
That's a key element.
That was well understood.
I just wanted to say, in terms of what you need to come back for, clarifying my own comment, you know, I mean, if a cluster wants to change their tot lot, we want to know every single piece of equipment color, so we can't hold you to anything less.
Fair enough. I just don't represent clusters, so I'm new to that.
Lucky.
All right. Any other questions, comments before we?
You guys will have to test out the equipment though, right?
bring our kids up.
Okay. All right. I have a list of affected parties here. We got some comments previously. Some people wanted to talk, some people don't. So I'm going to go through the list. If you don't want to talk, that's fine. Just let me know, just to make sure we don't miss anybody. First on my list is Martha Green. Would you like? Are you here? Would you like to speak? Okay. Sherry, 1210@gmail.com. Would you like to speak? Is that a no? Okay. Bill Luck. Troy S. Not going to try his last name. Karen Holmquist. Rebecca Totten. Let's see. Ventana Woods West Cluster. Any representatives from the cluster? Joanna Henk.
I'm no longer on the board, but I do think it's important that the look of North Shore continues to look more like our clusters and not like something at the town center or Mosaic. It's important to keep the cluster, the new development, to look more like Reston.
Okay. And if you have further comments, you're welcome to come up and speak. Okay. You're welcome. Norma Hiller. Mark and Aaron Schultz. Sherry Aber. Sorry, I'm bad. These last names challenge me sometimes.
That's perfect. I'm good. You guys covered all the questions. Plus more.
Okay. Great, thank you. Susan Bethel. John Albert. He's the executive director of Tall Oaks Assisted Living. I know he's spoken in the past. Okay.
Check the next page. One more page.
John Coho. Lindsay L. Lindsay. And the Villas de España cluster. Robert K. Okay. On this list, we had 5 people, and one said they wanted to speak. Kathleen Huber. All right, we have a winner. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for serving. First of all, I'm a new Reston resident. I moved here about 9 months ago in Tall Oaks area. I have a townhouse on Park Overlook. So I couldn't attend the first meetings. And looking at what's been planned and designed and so on. I'm very concerned about the village center concept. I don't know, as an owner of a townhome deep down in off North Shore, I don't know how inviting that is for me to come and build community, be a part of the community. It looks very small. Now, I understand these good people want to make money. I understand that. But I'm very concerned about the original charter of Reston and what the village center concept is and what it means to me and all the people here who've come as well. It's not really a village center. I mean, I see the green there, but if I'm coming to that facility, I'm not going to walk in that green. That seems like a very private space for the people who are homeowners there. So what I'm limited to is the amphitheater and park area. And it looks very small. I don't have a real sense of what it is. And again, it's just a comment. I'm late to the game. I know that much of this has already been planned, and I don't know how much is final. But I wanted to say something about that because I think it's important not to lose Reston entirely. I've lived in this area since 1988. I've seen Reston change greatly, and I'm disturbed by that. I think those architectural drawings are fantastic. I think they're great, but they don't seem like Reston to me. And I agree with the 4-story thing. That's very concerning to me. I guess I can leave it at that. I want you all to know that I want to use this space too. And I have what appears to be 2 questionable retail places and a small amphitheater. And I don't know how I would use that exactly. So I will, but I just want it to be more inviting to the surrounding community. It's important to me. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone I missed in the audience? Please come forward, tell us who you are and your thoughts. And just a reminder, the 3-minute rule.
Thank you. Tammy Petrine, 41 years living here. I have followed this project from the beginning. I was at the P&Z when this was approved. Mr. Looney, when asked by one of the commissioners how many retail spaces would be in the 8,500 square foot allotment for our village center concept, and honestly, I don't know this lady. I've never set eyes on her. I want to go over and wrap her in my arms and kiss her because she has hit the nail on the head. Does this project serve the community? The spaces, and I'm seeing this over and over, and I go to Reston P&Z committee and I see what's being presented. And the commissioner asked Mr. Looney how many retail units would be in that 8,500. And this is on tape, you can see it. And I believe he said 10 to 12. Let's pretend he said 10. Divide 8,500 by 10, 850 square feet per retail. Now I know that there are 2 for sure. We're missing 8, but let's assume there were 10. That means you have 10 owners coming to that place. How much parking is there? Are there about 19 spaces, public parking? So if one store, if there are 10 of them, as Mr. Looney espouses, that's 10 spaces for owners. How many spaces are there for the public to get there and patronize those businesses? I'm very concerned about that. I will also guarantee you, if at the County Planning Commission, the streets had been phrased as alleys, this would never have passed. So again, we're smashing a lot of stuff in a very small area and calling things amphitheaters and plazas and this kind of vocabulary that leads common usage of language to think it's something completely different. And I am very concerned about this, and I'm very happy that you're asking the questions you are asking. It's very concerning that this is really a glorified cluster with 2 retail buildings and very insufficient parking. And I've also talked to people at the assisted living, and they don't know how they are going to park all of the staff and visitors for assisted living, because now it is delineated. So that's their problem, I get that. But this is a community, and we work together to solve problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else out there that would like to speak? Okay. Would you like to respond to any of the comments? Okay. I guess let's go around one more time and provide any final thoughts and looking for direction here.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of stuff tonight. One thing I'd like to add on there is to provide the civil engineering plans for the grading. I think that would help tell a story to what you guys are doing out there. Photography in addition to the other requests tonight.
Neil?
No comments.
No additional comments.
Richard, anything else?
Just wondering where this is leading. The application said requests for final approval of the general architectural landscaping design for the residential portions of Tall Oaks. And with all the comments we've had, I'm not sure we're in a position to make any kind of final approval at this point, but if we are, let's discuss it. But that's what you guys are looking for, right?
Eventually, but I mean, I think
That's what the application says, so.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify what we're trying to do.
Final approval of general design sounds like conceptual.
Same as conceptual. That was my only comment.
Bruce?
I wanted to, I talked about some other things, but I wanted to think, looking over the drawings again, it was mentioned, and I think appropriately, the uniform height, the sense of walking through the valley of, we can call it a muse, but it's a valley. We have no breakup of any of the height. So we haven't, that's been mentioned, but I didn't want that thought to be missed, that it's just seems to be set up to be, to meet a absolute goal of density of the number of units we want, that's one applicant wants, and therefore it seems so uniformly tall that it seems very un-Reston-like, particularly in the context of where it's sitting, not in the
Okay, thank you. Grace?
I'll just reiterate to try to look at, tying it in, as they mentioned earlier, to the existing community. As I mentioned, I like the playground elements, but I just feel like the other elements that are incorporated on the site seem more modern, like they're not as natural as Reston would be in that community, Tall Oaks.
No comments, just I agree with Richard, just trying to sort out our action.
Sure. One question I have is one comment that struck me is this is a different development than we're used to, and it's sort of like a cluster, right? And are you planning to have any kind of design guidelines for the development, and what should we be looking at in the future as, in 15 years down the road when someone wants to make improvements or change things?
I mean, we've considered a lot of stuff right at this point, and we're still kind of in flux, obviously, because there's still a lot of working parts on this. I think that was evident here tonight. We were looking at this from a conceptual standpoint, still at this point, and trying to get our needle bearing. We're very close, I think, but that's something we can take into consideration as we move forward.
Yeah, I think it would be worth working with Reston Association to put something together so we have something for the future, because if we don't, it's probably not going to be beneficial to you and your residents.
Agreed, and I think structurally it's going to be a an association within an association that's within an association. In terms of the structure, I think the idea is it has to relate to the commercial and is going to have a set of covenants that govern the relationship of the residential with the commercial. It similarly then will have internal associations vis-a-vis the different products that are out there, and the condo buildings are clearly going to have their own internal association for the operation of the common areas and other elements of the condo building. So there's still a lot of groundwork to be laid in terms of how you layer on those different documents, but it's a point well taken of how you structurally deal with 15 years down the road once you have folks living there and they want to put their DirecTV, the next generation DirecTV antenna on the side of the building, and what do you do?
Right, change lights, change colors. So, if you haven't seen the cluster standards that we do have, they detail out what folks can do, and so different clusters have different standards. So it could be a good guideline for you guys to follow.
Okay.
So I don't know which. It seems like there's a lot of comments. I don't think you're ready for a
Yeah, we'll
vote.
defer on any type of decision.
I'd like to make a motion, we defer the application and ask the applicant to consider all the comments listed herein, which have been very carefully noted by our capable staff.
It's all been recorded.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Driven so fast.
It's almonds in there.
That's great. I used to get special certificate parts, but I must not be.
Thanks, Mark.
Here. Thanks, Mark. Okay. DRB notification process. The Honorable Kate Fulkerson. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I think Julie is going to be joining me in a minute.
Come on up, Julie.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
As promised from your last meeting, I sent out in advance for you to consider the edits that we talked about to refine the notification process for development and redevelopment projects. In particular, we were most interested in trying to be more prescriptive as to what we were looking for, either in packets or in notice and notice of affected parties, what we're expecting to see. It would greatly help staff to have this additional information, as well as, I think, anybody who's making applications to know exactly what they're expecting from us. So after we put it out, we made some refinements and wanted to get your input. Any thoughts that you had? Criticism is welcome. Yeah, I knew you were going to have
Son of a
something.
gun, how could you imagine that? No, I just had a couple of questions. I think it's all going the right direction, but some of the functional aspects of this, well, I'll hit you with my questions so we can discuss all this. The 21 days, I know we've all talked about this. Most applicants, most architects, since that's the part of the business I know, that's why they created a charrette, and that we work up until the last minute. And in this case, kind of what we're saying there is you have to really finish everything and put it out there 21 days and or 14 days or whichever it is, depending on what you're doing. Is that possible? Is that a reasonable request to make? And I know some of the boards, like when I've had to work with Fairfax County ARB, you have to send everybody all these sets of drawings. I think it's 2 weeks in advance or something like that. So that was one question. Is this going to add a month to the process from the time they theoretically finish their work and then everyone sits and waits 21 days for it to come? Is this adding a month or more or around that? That was one question. In that same light, we just had a recent thing, and this applies to workshops and everything we possibly do. Our weekly luncheons that we all go make secret plans, the usual stuff we do. But for example, this week, we were supposed to have a workshop with St. John's people tonight. Last week, I guess, or the week before or something, it got changed and bumped to next week. So would that mean you start over the 21-day clock again? Do they have to then re-notify? And how does this work functionally truly with our stuff? Because that's a whole new meeting. What happens with that? Another question. And then under your notice distribution, whatever, item number, I guess it's a little I. Number 2, first class mail to a minimum of 25 different owners. I'm wondering, is the 25 a significant number, or should it be more within a certain distance? Because sure as heck, if you say 25, the person over there didn't get notified, but these 3 people did. Or I don't know where the 25 came from. I just want to make sure we're covered, because that's what we're trying to do here, is to make sure people don't come in, our members don't come in and go, I didn't know this was happening. So I don't know if a distance is better than a number where it says 25 or not.
Yeah, I had that one. I had the same question because it says close vicinity, and
yeah,
if the intent is to be more prescriptive, that seems a little vague.
Yeah, and then the last one I had was about it says DRB can defer an application if the information presented is not the same as the information reviewed. I can't think of a time people didn't come in and say, well, at the last minute we made this little change, blah, 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 because of whatever. They got more knowledge, they've had a comment, they do something. So I just want to be realistic as we can with this, so that we're not hamstringing developers or us, or applicants, I should say, not developers necessarily. Those were just a couple of thoughts I had when I was reading through this.
One comment I've gotten from people in the industry that they're concerned about is, for instance, tonight they were deferred, right? And so if they go back and make changes, even if they say they had to make a small change and they make them quickly within a week, they still lose that month. And
they got another 21 days.
There was a concern, and I know we originally set that up so people had time to respond and get packages and review them. The concern I have, and I think it's a legitimate question from industry, is that fair to have that same timetable the whole time through the process, or is there a time, where it can be less, right? So maybe I don't have it all mapped out in my head, but maybe there's some submittals that require the 21 days, but then there's some, particularly later on when you're in final details and there's probably not as much public input, and maybe there's less time that you need to turn things around.
Like case in point, what we just did is to defer the Tall Oaks. With the 21-day thing, they'd have 7 days to get everything changed if they wanted to make our next meeting.
Next month, yeah.
In next month. And I don't think they're going to get all their drawings changed in 7 days.
No.
Even with Neil's people working for him, but.
We have 14 days, right? If 21 days for the
It
notice.
says 21 days is not.
14 days for designs, though. So
But even then,
yeah, 14
I think maybe we need to talk about a deferral such as we did tonight. Does that change the clock or not? Because otherwise, they're not going to get all these drawings done in 7 days and submitted. Not going to happen. So then you're bumping 2 months out. Maybe that's what they need.
Right.
I don't know. But, it's just,
They might, but
yeah.
You have the materiality there, though, because
Turn your mic, yes, thank you, sir.
if they...
Say what, Will?
As I was saying, the key was that materiality. If you had them deferred for very minor changes, then no one's likely to get upset because they didn't know what they've done. Then a shorter time might be something you can consider. But if the changes are material, so that what they've done is now really different, which almost always it will be, then the people are supposed to know about that so they can opine or not opine. I think that's our goal. I think the point of this was transparency to the community, like the St. John's Woods crowd that was very concerned they didn't know what was going on. And I think that's what we're trying to get. It definitely is good for achieving that. But if you were talking about just a minor change, like the top lot material we discussed this evening, that no one's likely to care about, that does seem a little unfair to the developer to have to wait potentially.
But for consistency, I think we can't, whether it's a tot lot or a 5-story building, I think it's the same story though, isn't it?
Right, well, it's materiality. That's why I say it goes, if you're going to refine it, it has to go to materiality. Because if it's really minor of any nature, then it's probably really minor and not going to be a problem. But if it's material, if it's significant, if someone's going to care about it, meaningfully care about it, then you want to have the greatest transparency possible.
I thought there was language somewhere about the DRB has the option of refusing to hear something that changes.
It's in here.
So, I mean, to me, when we've had people show up with last-minute changes as far as that goes, that doesn't have anything to do with notification so much. I mean, people already know that the project's here. And if it's a simple change, then we can agree to hear it. And if we think it's too complicated, we can say, sorry, we're not going to be able to review that tonight.
Well, it says in here, this is what we need to clarify. The information submitted in the DRB application package in advance of a DRB decision meeting may not be materially changed between the 14-day notice requirement and the DRB meeting date. So that's 14 days that they can't be changed. The DRB may defer an application if information presented at the meeting is not the same as the information reviewed by the secretary, it says, by DRB secretary. So that allows us
I think
to
that's a helpful thing, because that panel we were in last week where the materials that we received did not match what he was presenting, would have given us the opportunity to defer that right away, knowing there was a conflict. So I think that helps that situation out.
And granted, this only applies to development and redevelopment too, so.
That's only carry over.
I don't know, those were just my thoughts. I just wanted it to work. That's all.
I think the primary emphasis I saw out of this, as well as with the community, was the initial notice, and that's where I focused my attention in terms of how to interpret this. I think the major issue here is that initial notice and how many people get that notice. So when I read it from that perspective, I'm comfortable with it. I think after that, common sense and what we can and cannot do play out on a case-by-case basis.
Let me say, well, the only thing I would say is we've had a lot of discussions about not doing that, and we've been trying to avoid getting in trouble in the future. So
yeah,
generally I would agree with you, but given their current state, I think we just have to be careful about being really specific.
Okay.
Based on guidance.
I was going to add that if there's going to be, I should go to the public. So if there's any doubt about whether there's going to be enough time, whether there's going to be more time, it should always go to the transparency. And I think that we tended to be looked at as trying to address the concerns of the professionals, which is fine. But the folks that were upset and that they don't, not everyone is aware of the first instance, and not all changes may be seem so important to us or to members here, but to the community may be significant. So I have emphasized that if there's a situation where it's a question of whether there's enough notice, it should always go to it. We're going to provide the more notice. And I understand that sometimes that pushes things back, but I think that's the best way to make the whole entire community comfortable with what happens here.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I think somehow I'm just asking, do we need to make a difference between the initial notice, everybody knows what's happening and so on, and the continuation of a project? Like in this case, our last case that we did, the Tall Oaks, it's been around for 3 years. Everyone now knows it's happening. Maybe they did in the beginning, now they do. Is there any reason we could change the notification requirement a little bit now that it's a project in process? You know, to me, there's a little bit of difference there. I agree with your transparency. That's why we're doing this.
Yep.
Is everybody knows what's going on. But now that everybody knows Tall Oaks is happening, everybody's seen the drawings a million times, as we have for 3 years now or more. Can we modify this to let that happen? So if they want to come back in our August meeting, do they have to have everything into us next week to do it? And that's not going to happen. So I don't want to jeopardize applicants versus transparency issue either. But
my question would be if there was a lot of, let's use one example. Just by way of an example that we're not addressing it in the real sense. If the concern of our concern, the concern of the public was the buffer on North Shore, how much time should the public have to see and how much time should we have to see what they're going to put there. So even though it's been out there for a long time, that's the issue. So, and so if we're going to reduce it, it's not just because we've heard this plan before. It's that there are some issues that remain significant to the public.
Okay, you wanted to say something?
Thank you. So one of the things we were thinking about, initial notice, very broad, give you ample opportunity to decide who you wanted it to go to, because that's why we referred back to the deed where you have the choice. 25 seemed like a logical number. That's what we had. I think the initial first round that we had with that, just try and hit as many people as we could on a big project. When you look on page 2, toward the bottom, one of the things we thought, okay, there's an initial project notification that's important. Let's do a big, wide swath and let people know in that notification that if they want to be registered as an affected party, that's where we were with St. John's Woods. It was really important, is people wanted to be kept up to date. Here's how you do that. Here's who you call. Here's how you get on the list by sending an email. So with that's what we did in the initial round. Subsequent notifications then could be done differently. Now, what I did not include in here was, and I'm just brainstorming with you out loud, is I didn't move away from the 21-day notice. Now, remember, not all the materials necessarily have to be done at that time on that 21 days. I mean, you can make an adjustment to that, you know, whatever you believe fits best. But let's pretend, just like you did this evening, they decide to come back to you in August. Well, they'd still be able, if they said, yeah, we're going to come back. We're going to have everything ready. By the time we meet, we'll have everything ready for them. Whether it's in the next 7 days or not, maybe the next 14 days, we'll have our designs redone for Tall Oaks. And, but they could still meet the 21-day notice requirement, technically, right? They could say between now and the next meeting, yes, we're still interested, and we're going to send out notice to the affected party list. And this section of the resolution allows them to do is that can either be electronically or by mail. And you read off the list of those who registered as affected parties for Tall Oaks. So we were trying to build in that flexibility because we realized that, and staff in particular, your covenant staff, really realized, hey, this is an issue, you know, they saw your side of it from the developer, from the architect side. This is burdensome. Now, the timing is entirely up to you. I think that in terms of when you want to see materials, we specifically added something on page 3 at the top on that 3 little I, that new section that said, hey, if they put something in your box to look at and you spent the weekend reviewing it and coming up with comments, because, I mean, the amount of time and effort that you all put into looking at these materials before you get to this meeting is immense. You know, there's a lot to go through. And I know you do site visits and things like that. If they were to come to the meeting with something materially different that you weren't prepared, that you hadn't, you know, wrapped your thoughts around, then you should be given the opportunity to say, you know, I'm not going to do that tonight. So that was one of the things that we added in there for you, because I have noticed that sitting in the audience over the past several months that something will be in your box, you know, staff has loaded it up in Dropbox for you to look at and come to the table and it's different than what was in your box. How fair is that? Is what we were thinking on your behalf, is that's not fair to you, and they're looking for maybe a decision that evening. So again, just putting the ball in your court. But timing as to when the materials need to be to you, whatever the case might be available on the website, that's up to you. We did the 14-day timing because that's, as you noted, that's I think what the county does. So we're trying to mirror what they might be used to. I think it's like a 2-week time frame. But, you know, it's up to you. What is best for you? What would you like to see included in it? Silence.
Well, what's everybody think about, let's just talk about Tall Oaks, for example.
From scratch or moving forward?
I mean, from what happened tonight, if this is in place and this is not in place yet.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so they can come back tomorrow if they wanted. But how would we want that to happen? Because it's like, everybody knows it's happening, so it's not a mystery anymore. There's a lot of transparency there. If they come back with the drawings we did and whatever redesign we hope that they do, whether they shrink some buildings or grow some buildings and they plant or leave 1 million trees along North Shore, whatever they happen to do, I gather they want to be pushing this project, the applicant wants to be pushing this project along, doesn't want it to sit any longer than 3 years it's already been sitting. How much notification of any of those changes do our RA members need at this point, since it's ongoing, you know? I mean, what do they need to see? They need to see it 21 days before the next meeting, they need to see it 7 days before the next meeting, in terms of a continuation. I mean, I don't disagree with any of this for the initial thing. That makes sense. Plenty of time, plenty of transparency. But do we need to modify this for follow-ups? That's, I guess, what I'm asking.
I would agree with that. Some reduction to make it a little bit easier.
A follow-up could be 7 days notice, or
Well, maybe it's that they want to say 21 days ahead of time, you know, via email, we're going to come back to the next board meeting. And then the materials could be 7 days ahead of time for their review.
which is kind of what it is now.
To compress that time
I mean,
frame.
it's,
Sort of.
what do we have 7
Yeah,
days,
staff
right?
needs, staff needs a minimum of 7 days prior to the meeting to receive the final material in order to prepare it and put it in your Dropbox and do all the things that we need to do. And so from an application standpoint, we're typically looking for 14 days notification anyway to give people the opportunity to review it, register as an affected party if they wish, based on the new information that's provided. So at a minimum, we're at 14. And often what the developers are doing, they're sending out notification letters with the Dropbox location, but not necessarily putting their information in there until 14 days in advance anyway. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. And then the final edits are done 7 days prior with the understanding that it's not to change at that point until the reading date.
So there's
I mean,
three.
what you described makes sense. And I don't have it in front of me because I printed it at work and I don't have a copy, but is that what this says? What she described?
I think that the 7 days is the only piece missing that we can work
Yeah.
into it.
Well, there were 3 dates that you mentioned. One is notice, one is submission of documents, and one is
Uploaded the
No more
initial
changes.
package of documents, and then
And
the
7 more.
final tweaks and changes they want to make
Which
7
they
days.
could continue to do within.
during
yeah.
the next 7 days.
Mhm.
That's the way you present it.
And that seems to be working. Now, when they have to go back and they want to come back a month later, that's a crunch period for them. But they do what they feel they
I mean,
need
so
to
what
do.
this is saying is that if they get everything back to you in 14 days, they could make the August meeting.
Sure. It's just a
But
matter
they
of sending
can't,
that
then.
notification out
I
and
think
making
14
sure
days
they've
is
got
reasonable.
the upload of the new information by
Right.
14 days in advance.
But if, in this case, they can't get it done in 14 days, then it bumps them to September. That's just what it is. Right? I'm just trying to understand what this is saying. That's what this is saying.
That's where we would go.
Okay.
We would recommend September.
So we give them 2 weeks to,
I think 14 days is commensurate with plenty of other jurisdictions. I just,
Yeah.
to Bruce's point, I've just never wanted Reston to be perceived as way out there, more irritating to work with than any of the other jurisdictions in all of the metro area. And I don't think this is. I think 14 days is commensurate with.
But the 21-day notification period remains, that they're going to come back.
Yeah, if they know they're going to come back. I think it's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, hey, okay, they're going to put notice out, but 14 days out from that, they need to get stuff and then.
Right.
And staff has to.
21 days is important if someone's really passionate about it and wants the time to adjust their schedule. I think that's a nice courtesy to give and maintain for the community.
And I think that's what definitely what I heard in 2 instances just on RA property. We did when we were doing the Lake Newport soccer, what we clearly heard is we didn't have enough advance notice. And so it's like, okay, we need to apply what we've done here to that. We just road tested that a couple of weeks ago on 2 pieces for Lake Newport for repaving, because we're repaving the parking lot over there with the 21 days advance. People really appreciated that. We're also doing some invasive plant removal, did the same thing for the cluster to let them know that we're going to, that's the buffer. Again, they appreciate that. So I recommend you stay with the 21 days notice. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to get their materials done.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think maybe that's worth noting to the folks too that are applying that, so they understand it, right, as we're changing that.
Well, here's a question. For a workshop, for example, the one that we were supposed to have tonight and is now next week, I've yet to go to a workshop that the applicant didn't come in with a whole bunch of stuff. No one came in blank with a blank piece of paper. I haven't seen anything for that workshop. So does that mean if they come in with something, we're supposed to just immediately defer it and say, sorry, we haven't seen anything?
That's where we did put in the kind of exception, with the exception of work sessions and information-only presentations, because it's not until they make application that it's not fair that you're not seeing something. But if it's a work session and they're coming with concept plans, that's another one. Although St. John's Woods is interesting with since.
So the notification of 21 days doesn't mean you have to have all the stuff.
Right.
If it's a work session or information only. They just have to notify that it's happening.
Just a clarification, you said 21 days they don't have to have anything done, for anything. It's only they just provide notice and
They're
then
just notifying the intent to attend.
That's what they're saying.
And so the public isn't then aware, and then the materials could come in a week later.
To staff.
Yeah, then they come in at 14 days.
So the materials are coming the same time
Okay.
to the board as what would be available.
So I did have a question about in the notification requirements list, the fourth item, it says the Reston Association website link to view plans and/or project information. Information will be posted 14 days in advance of the DRB meeting date. But then down the very last item on the last page before the attest section, it says the DRB secretary shall post the applicant submission packet on the RA website at least 7 days.
Gotcha.
What's is there a distinction between those two, or is that?
Just didn't catch that.
Okay.
So, you just tell me what your preference date is. So we're telling them 14.
In order to post it 14 days, then you need it 21
81
days.
days.
Yeah.
If we were to say 7 days, then if you got it in 14, that gives you a week to.
Right, I think it's a little, I think the way they're interpreting it is they're making it available based on the information provided in their notification on that site, not necessarily on our RA site. So they would give me the link, I'd be able to open it, download it, upload it to where I need to go, but I don't typically put it on the RA site until it's 7 days before, and typically there's no more changes. So they're making it available for the public and all the folks that were notified 14 days in advance.
That's the difference. The applicant will make.
Yeah, I think that 7-day thing was on purpose, to give the staff time.
Time, right. So the applicant can make it available on their site versus we're making it available on our site.
But that first reference as 14 days also refers to an RA website link. Is that true? There's a website link that's sponsored by the RA that the developer puts their application to?
So information on how to register, are you looking up at 3 little I at the top of that
I'm
page?
looking at 4 little I. A Reston Association website link to view plans.
1A4.
Top of
Will be
page 2.
posted 14 days in advance. Gotcha. That should be 7.
I don't
Right?
know. I'm hearing Mario saying there's 2 different locations for information, right? The developer provides their own link somewhere
Right,
else
right.
on their own hosted
Mhm.
website.
And that's
correct. And oftentimes it's a Dropbox or an FTP site of their own
And then 7 days, you put something
on the RA site.
There is an
on our site
and or
and in our
there.
Dropbox.
Correct.
I don't.
There is an and or, let's see, view plans and or project information.
Right, okay.
I did that purposefully because we may or may not have plans, but we'll have information about the project. Gee, we're going to hear about it. It's at this location.
But the official information would be from staff it's posted on.
Well, I just think on that 4 little I,
4 little
it
I.
either needs to change to not say Reston Association website, or it needs to change to say 7 days. Right.
Well, keep in mind that it says a website link to look as opposed to posting it on the website. So I think that one refers to, we'll put a link where they can go wherever
To the
it
applicant.
might be to the applicant. And on 7 days when we're actually posting it officially from the secretary on our site. So it's a more formal thing than just a link to something.
Okay.
I think that's the
How do
distinction
you
that's
mean
supposed to be there.
wordsmith so that everyone would interpret Reston Association website link to be, as you stated, as opposed to a first reading of that, to me would say, I'm looking at Reston Association's website.
Well,
Something
I think you do have to change it because
A
if they
web-
submit on the 14th day, you have 1 day, like that day you have to post the link, right? So there's no flexibility for staff.
Then posting their link is identified in their notification letter. So the link that the applicant provides, I have not been posting, just the information provided.
So it seems like we need to strike
7
Reston
days.
Association.
Yeah, that's exactly that's just what I did.
Website.
Just a website link to view.
That's
That
part of
would
the
do it.
notification.
I'm going to get rid of that second
Seems good.
information as well on there. I wanted to go back, if I could, to the concept of the minimum of 25 different owners. One of the things that we noticed when we were doing the paving, for instance, is kind of lesson learned, and we're getting ready to hold a community meeting on Hook Road recreation area. Lesson learned when we did the soccer field initially back in February is we did periphery. We didn't do, so if you've got a Bayfield cluster, we did the houses that touched, the field. We didn't do the entire cluster. And what we got were people who didn't abut the field, but may have been across the street. They walked across, and I thought, I told staff, I said, let's just go ahead and include, if a cluster is next to something, let's just go ahead and include the whole cluster. It's safer that way. I think we did the same thing with Williams Transco Pipeline. When we had them come to review with you, we just grabbed an entire cluster, just so nobody felt like they were left out. Like, gee, I live next to it, but nobody told me, and it impacts me. So I think that's why we did the minimum of 25, especially for a large project, because we're looking at something that's pretty big, and we wanted to do that. I think we're going to err, RA staff is going to err on the side of caution and probably require people to do a little bit more than they should, just because we want to get as much notice out. It's hard with proximity, too. It's like, okay, is it a mile radius, a quarter
Right.
mile? And it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Fairfax County does 500 feet or 25 minimum, so maybe you could say that plus the addition of or any cluster within the 500-foot radius, so you get everybody that's within there. That way you are,
I think
with the notifications.
It's a good comment.
Makes sense.
Okay, so 500 feet?
500 feet or minimum of 25 notices. If you have a less densely populated area, that 500 might only cover 3 or 4 people. I don't know if that exists here, but.
And I was like, and the entire cluster if it is adjacent
Right,
to.
that's the
I
second.
think if it touches the cluster. just
My point was on the
yeah.
cluster. If a cluster's touching it, I think it's better to be safe.
Yeah,
The whole cluster.
hit them all, yeah.
But I think you have to say
And we do say that in that one, as all unit
Yeah.
or clusters, so we did cover that.
Because the 25 could be made up in the cluster itself. So I think you just have to be careful how you word that so that they still have to include the other people. I guess if you do the
All
500
cluster
minimum,
properties
yeah.
within that touching, that offset.
As long as you have the 500-foot minimum, then you're not limited by that yet. So that should be good.
You still have gaps where you have the non-cluster parts of Reston where the single-family homes are spread out far enough that 500 feet's going to get 2 houses.
Yeah, that's true.
Half the rest of the street, but that'll
And then you get the
Well, that's
opportunity
where
to
the
pick the
minimum
25.
comes in.
Yeah, put that in there.
get down the rest of the street.
Another question, now that we've solved all the other problems.
Why are we doing this?
Page 2B, little I, number 4, where it says applicants may obtain the surrounding property owners, yada, yada. I don't think we need to tell people how to do it. I don't think that should be part of a resolution.
Okay.
We're within Reston. I think they can figure out how to do it. We don't need to tell them. That's why we keep in all of our guidelines, we try not to say building code this or something, we try not to refer stuff but that's just me. Everyone else.
I think the intent is that this is what the applicant must include in their notification? We're telling them that they have to tell the affected parties how to
No,
do
no,
that.
number 4 just says they have to go to Fairfax County to get the information from the tax
Well,
rolls.
they may get it.
That's all I'm talking about. You want to see on big screen right here? Look over here.
I think the idea is that, don't ask us, go to the county.
I think it's helpful if you had an engineering firm or an architect from not out of this area.
I don't think we're trying to be helpful here. No, I'm just, I don't know why we would put that in there. It's our resolution, is
Yeah.
what we do.
I think I know,
You know.
but I think it's Will's point, don't come to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think that's what I'm saying. God, well, we're agreeing.
If we don't tell them where to get it, then they come to staff.
If we don't tell them, they will
If you
bug
tell
us.
them, if you prescribe where to go get it, and
Then
then
you tell
we're
them.
responsible for making sure that information remains
Right.
correct
They're-
in the
they're-
next 5 to 10 years.
Why
And what
don't-
if they're no longer there?
Why don't you move that, maybe not even that specific, just up into the notification
Yeah,
requirements
Fairfax
list? Tell the applicant that they need in their notification to inform the applicants on how to obtain the surrounding. Oh, no, I'm misreading it, I'm sorry.
I think you need a big screen.
No, it's
I
not.
don't know. Can you see this?
I can read it all.
Cannot do everything from a phone.
He needs paper. So we don't think that needs to be there? Is that what we're saying?
I see your point, but
I think it needs.
But I also think staff just said that it's helpful to have this so that they're not picking up the phone and.
How do we do this?
They would call us to provide it.
Then you-
We have to help
It
some
improves it.
applicants that aren't from engineering firms, and how to access that information anyway.
But I like it that they have to call you, and it improves communication and gets them part of the process and
That's right.
get to meet our staff.
Right. We get all kinds of versions of it with stars or dots or color coded.
We're gonna need a bigger boat, we're trying to avoid that.
you could put in, please contact the DRB president and co.
Yeah.
And provide their
I'm
number.
gonna need a new email.
Just call Richard at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a few comments, sounds like we need to tweak a couple things, and then maybe we'll do a final review, is that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I have one final question or comment. If you had an application that had lingered a long time, St. John's Woods goes away for a year, wants to come back, is there a time frame for a new initial notification to let the community know, hey, they're back?
That's a good point, and I defer to you guys on
Well,
that.
did
Do you
we-
feel like you want to put a time limitation on something where they have to re-notify? I mean, I
Yeah,
would think
certified
that
mail, not just via
Right.
Dropbox or whatever
Right.
the method is.
Don't you have a rule
Yeah,
that if
that's
it's
what this
changed
says.
after 6 months,
It's a
like
new
decisions are
I think
good,
it's,
right?
after a year, our approvals die, don't they?
Well,
Or whatever.
if
I
it
think
was
he's talking about-
approval, yeah, but if it was just deferred and then they haven't been back for a year, then
But-
we
I think you would want to
But this would
reinitiate.
require, the-
Application should lapse after a year period.
this already says that you have to notify people, right?
Yeah, this says every time you come back, you have to
Yeah,
notify.
we make
Yeah,
them
so even if they
re-notify
were
every
the
10%.
initial- The certified mailings versus the, for the first class versus just an email to everybody. Should that be done more officially after a
You
long
might have
period of time?
new residents, you might have new
Right.
people that need to be notified. This kind of covers all instances, whether they come back a year later, they still got to do this.
No, it
Right.
just
How
makes
they
a
do it,
distinction between the initial application and
So don't you want, after a year, that it would be considered a new application?
Yeah.
We usually withdraw the application if it's been held for so long.
9 months versus a year where it lapses, though, is that something where?
I mean, Tall Oaks has been going on for 3 years, right?
And new people have come into, the one woman who spoke, she was new, she didn't know all this had happened.
So the last time they were here for the conceptual approval versus now for the final approval was, what, a year or more? And the application wasn't dead, it was still active, I think. So would those people deserve the initial certified mailing request or notification?
But if it was like 6 months to a year has passed since the last time they were before you, maybe then the clock starts again and they have to redo the initial. Because 6 months would seem
Too short.
Seems short.
Yeah.
too short.
Yeah, make it at least a year.
Make it
After a
Make
year.
it a year.
Okay.
That seems
So after a year, you have to restart it. Okay.
My 2 cents,
Restart
but
the
what do I know?
notification process.
Okay. Okay.
I do read documents on my smartphone, but I don't.
As I said,
12
I could
months-
see it,
12 months
I
would be
just
better
couldn't
than a year,
understand it.
So my grandmother.
So about 365 days.
But that's not always true.
That's true.
Close enough, though.
Okay.
Hypothetically, let's say I come back and see you in August?
Do you need a new
Seems good.
notification?
Yeah. You need 14 days, you gotta get it
She's
to.
notifying me right now.
Link on
I'm
the
providing
RA
notice
website.
verbally right now.
There you go.
It's being recorded.
To mail it to Grant.
Thank you for doing all that.
Well, and thanks for the comments. I appreciate you taking the time to look through it.
Is there anything else you all have for us? Or?
Supposed to have more.
Oh, that's easy. So there, I was going to add one line item, but you had design guideline edits also. You guys are welcome to stay for this too if you want to listen, because for the next two things.
Well, yeah, we put them on the last agenda, and now we're trying to look at a few more things. And if you looked at it, if anybody have looked at them, they're fairly simple. We're trying to just get a little bit of flexibility and be able to staff approve some of the things that we don't think, or that are easier applications, so we can turn them around a little quicker for the members. It seems to be something that most members want us to do, is to try to get these applications approved and back quicker. So we're trying to find opportunities for that. These were just a few of the ones that we identified as some of the simpler projects. Artworks, of course, we're seeing a lot of those sculptures, bird baths, water features, bubblers, those kinds of things. And at this point, based on the current guideline, there is no opportunity for staff to review any of those.
A quick question for you. I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay.
Is it on the website here, the Dropbox?
What? I
It's in
can't find it now.
Dropbox. Yes.
I looked at it earlier.
Edits. It is under design guidelines,
Dave,
edits.
516, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have my,
It's the PDF one, not the Word edits.
Yes, PDF.
Is it under this meetings?
No. Down there at the bottom, design guidelines, right there at your finger.
proposed edits, the very last
Suggested edits.
Down here, got it.
So,
suggested edit, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, we've seen some pretty elaborate water features, and I don't know how height describes some of what we've seen.
No, you can't see it.
Admittedly, they don't happen a lot, but when they do, they're potentially impactful, shall we say.
I mean, most of the water features, fountains we've seen are pretty horrible.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
That's another way to say it.
Yeah.
Impactful.
Not
So,
that staff can't detect horrible, but
Well, is it,
that's what we're here to do.
I mean,
though, is-
is staff's concerned really about just the two things that are actually listed, bird baths and water?
Bird baths, garden sculptures, even if we could get something where we could approve in the rear location versus the front location. But we do see quite a few of these.
I just think bird baths is a very narrow part of water feature, right? So if we're not saying water feature and we're just saying bird bath, that might be a conversation.
I'm not sure when it qualifies as art.
Okay.
We don't review bird baths, do we?
They're not
It's not
considered
art.
permanent structures. The language came from somewhere in one of the guidelines, I think.
I don't ever remember seeing a bird bath.
Well,
I've never reviewed a bird
okay,
bath.
so if we struck the word bird bath and went to garden features and bubblers or water features instead.
Well, I think you have to be careful with the water feature, because a water feature can be a massive,
Very elaborate.
you know,
Yeah.
Well,
koi ponds.
these are
Koi
just
ponds,
garden
yeah.
style sculptures, not anything larger than 3 foot high.
Well, I'm remembering one up in, off of Reston Parkway, up in North Point area, that was a Japanese garden with a waterfall and extensive landscaping and a bridge maybe even, and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, I mean, again, they don't come along that often, but for that level of project, I think it should be.
But that'll
Do
be
you
a,
have some examples, maybe?
not just
of-
one.
I could probably
Of the
pull
type
some
of things that
examples
you're
and
talking-
send them to you, maybe. and
Maybe
that
we
would
could
help
Yeah, let's look at
clarify
them.
maybe
my-
find the right language for that.
All right.
I think gnomes wouldn't require an application, but anything else would.
What was that?
Gnomes are
Gnomes?
okay, no application needed.
I
Okay.
think we should
As long as
exclude
they're-
gnomes from.
As long as they're 18 inches or less.
Neutral
Okay.
colors.
And bird baths, take that out.
I did, I already scratched that one out.
So siding is a good one, I think,
The
personally.
siding exterior for clusters,
Yes.
you would agree with the staff
Match.
approved?
Anyone should be able to see that it's a
Okay.
match or not.
I'll put that in a more permanent fashion then the
Okay.
next time. And then again for roofing, same thing, match to previous approvals.
And the distinction.
Or the
of
different pond
architecturals.
decisions that have been approved by a DRB member or panel.
I mean, how do you, I don't want to be patronizing when I ask this, but,
Go ahead.
you know, I assume that staff is going to have a high level of scrutiny on this, and that we won't be, oh, staff approved. I mean,
No, we're gonna run reports to pond, because we have access to reports all day long that show what's been approved in a particular cluster, what color and what style. What we've run across a lot of is the question of the 3-tab versus the architectural style.
Exactly, that's not a match, ever.
No, that's not a match, so we've made that very clear that that's not a match. So they have to have found, proven approval for the same product in that particular cluster and/or single-family area.
So I think
You're
back
taking
to,
away all the easy stuff that gives us such satisfaction.
That's the point.
But I think-
Get rid of the easy stuff and give you the hard stuff.
I think back to my last panel meeting, we had several roof requests.
Right.
A lot of architectural shingles. We had one cluster who was against the standard entirely, although one property had been approved, but the cluster was there saying they never really wanted that and they don't want it to go forward. And we stood with the cluster. And we had another one where the cluster had no control over anything that they were doing, and there were lots of properties that had already been approved, right? And the style of the cluster was different. So with that one, we felt like, well, it was already, the barn doors were already open, and it wasn't as offensive as it would have been on the other cluster.
Right. Now, the reason they were there at your panel meeting was because the cluster registered as an affected party. Obviously, that kind of application still goes to a panel meeting.
Okay.
And also, they were disapproved at a consultation level and a requested panel review by the applicant, hoping for a different answer. That's still going to happen.
Yeah, that doesn't change.
That's not going to change.
So I guess one thing I don't understand is,
I don't understand.
it says here, if your project meets the following criteria, no application is required. Your RA advisor has been contacted to verify that the proposed change is in accordance with all aspects of the DRB approved color palette.
What are you looking at? You're not looking at the
The
roof?
existing.
I mean, we don't review stuff that's an exact match already. I mean, if you can't,
Right. Right, you don't even have to do an application if there's an exact color match.
Right.
So couldn't you just add approved color palette and shingle type and be done with it? Then you don't even need staff approval. You don't even need an application,
Shingle style.
right? Isn't that what we're trying to cover? That if you have the same color, same shingle style, you just contact your advisor and you're good. And
so you're saying if they're trying to do something that's not a match, it doesn't have to come to a panel, you guys can turn it down. That's what you're looking for the authority to do.
but that's already in here too.
Well, eventually, we would like the authority to do that, to save the applicant that step of waiting, you know, 2
don't
weeks
think
to be
that's in
turned
here.
down, and then having to wait another however long to come back, and then hear the same answer again potentially, because it's not in conformance with design guidelines or the cluster standard.
Well, what I'm saying is if you look at the next section, if the material is different, you have to do an application, it has to be reviewed by a DRB member or panel, right? So, but in the previous section, it says you don't even need an application if you match the color. You don't even need an application, right? So I think all you need to change is say DRB approved color palette and shingle style. Style, the right word.
Requires no application.
Requires no application. I think all you need is a comma or approved style, and that.
And eliminate the whole staff, just give them more more ability from no applications.
Because it says your RA advisor has been contacted. So you have to contact RA, let them know what you're doing. It says you put it into the DRB records, but they don't need an application, they don't need to go to do anything.
The guidelines are here to cover our rear ends when people do things they shouldn't do.
Right.
But the fact is that people do stuff all the time in Reston that never gets to us because it looks pretty much like what was always there. And that's not a big deal, ever, really. It's when they don't have a judgment. But those people are going to do it anyway.
A more delicate question might be, I don't know how many people are on your covenant staff now, but can all of them make the decision it's okay, or is there a hierarchy that says you're the only one that can be the final decision, or how does that work? I mean, if anybody on covenant staff can go, oh yeah, it's no problem, this is, it looks,
Well, we incorporate our newer folks, for sure. They have to have all their staff level
Right.
crews run through a DRB manager before they're actually finished and completed. So
So
they
any
write
of the
it,
things we're
we
saying-
edit it, and then it gets sent out until we come to that comfort level that they have a good solid understanding of what they need to do and how they write it.
I'm thinking back again to the last one for that, I can't remember which cluster it was. The one that already did have one approved, had the cluster not registered as an affected party. How do you think staff would have done? You would have, an applicant came in
It was
and said,
only one, it was one unit with a different.
we want 3-tab, there's another one in our unit that's already 3-tab, and it was approved for whatever reason.
Yeah, DRB makes mistakes just as
Yeah,
quickly
I
as
was going to
staff.
say, I'm not so sure that that initial decision for that other unit, I don't recall exactly, was the staff approved roof or if it was a consultation.
No, I assumed it was
Right.
DRB, there was
Yeah.
DRB, I'm just saying, under this new
This, we would base it
recommendation,
on that, yes. And when,
then so one property would have been enough to trip it for the whole
if there
cluster.
had been an approval from a DRB standpoint, we would base it on that.
So,
Because we have to hope that the cluster has made notation somewhere to let us know that that's not something they want.
so Richard has always made the point, back when we were talking about substitutions, that 3 people produce a better decision typically. You have more coverage, you have more talk going back and forth, and I guess this kind of gets to the question about staff hierarchy. Is it one person making this decision at a advisor level for a cluster, or is it getting multiple reviews by staff? Because the thing about a roof, when it's wrong, it's a huge mistake. It's
Correct.
expensive, and it's the roof of your whole house. I would kind of want any of these really expensive mistakes or these very impactful big areas to not all rely on staff. I mean, I think you should be glad to blame DRB for those mistakes.
Okay, well, just to make sure everyone understands what this says right now today. If there's no change in color, you do not need an application at all. The staff doesn't need to review it. All they have to do is be contacted and put it in the file. That's what it says today. So, and then it says if there's any changes, you have to go to either a DRB member in consultation or a panel. So you obviously have a choice there, right? So any changes, we have all these, it's already in place for us to review it. I think what you're asking for is for staff to be able to approve color changes and style changes, right? If there is no change, you want to be able to say it's fine. I'm saying you already have that right for the color, you just don't have that right for the style. And if that's what we're trying to do, you just have to add DRB approved color palette, comma, and style. And that's essentially what you're asking.
I think that makes good sense. So for that one, I would be happy with that.
And then any changes, we currently have a right to review it, and will have a right to review it in the future. So I think
I'm fine, yeah.
we're arguing about something that we don't need to argue.
And certainly if a cluster is changing a standard, it should come to the full board or to the...
She has another one for you.
Yeah, I
You're
think.
approaching 10 o'clock.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to put off a few and only give it to you in drips and drabs if you wish. I can add 3 more to the next meeting.
Hot
It's up
tubs
to
are
you.
not as big.
Huh?
Are we going through this, hot tubs next?
Well, we can.
That's an easy one,
Let's
isn't
move
it?
on to the next one.
Yeah.
All right, hot tub, we'll do, yeah, dribs and drabs is always a good idea, I think, because doing like 3 at a time is,
Would you prefer we just do 3 at a time? That's
I think we
fine.
could do this one, but maybe,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know how many more you have after that.
All right, so the hot tubs, yeah, in the rear location, in a cluster, have to go to consultation right now. So we're looking to see if we can't do something about that one. If we've got both adjacent signatures, both neighbors on either side, so yes, that's okay. They're in neutral colors, cabinets neutral, covers neutral, rear location. Currently, it has to go to con.
So a lot of hot tub applications that come through.
A fair amount. And keep in mind, those adjacent neighbors, if they don't like the hot tub in the rear, they're going to register as an affected party, and you guys would see it anyway.
I think one thing that, for that, that's to me important is that, not even that it's your neighbors, it's got to be the neighbors in sight of the hot tub. Because some people that install hot tubs don't always act in a way that's appropriate, and so, and that was
Not in Reston.
a concern in my neighborhood years ago, so that,
We don't.
You have
it's
filmed
a real problem.
Hey, I could do the same thing on my deck.
We don't require additional notification because
Please
of the hot
don't.
tub.
But it's not structural.
So they get the same benefit as anybody else does, building a deck or anything else. It's just the 3 required signatures. So in this one, and we're looking at as clusters. So one adjacent neighbor, in this case, we could require both adjacent neighbors and a cluster board officer.
I just keep seeing gnomes in a hot tub. Yep. Moving right along.
I would agree with both adjacent neighbors.
I just don't see
Another
why
one,
that has to go
and
up to
then
you
the-
guys to
an
review.
officer.
It's pretty simple.
So it's just changing what's already there to be a consult, to be a staff level decision?
That's right.
I would just say, and Richard may remember one, that in 15 years, I can remember a couple of contentious hot tub episodes where people were really rapt about someone doing a hot tub. So, if staff wants to take that on, again, I think there's a principle here of a design review board composed of residents of Reston who review their peers, and this kind of nibbles at that in a way that makes me a little uncomfortable.
I think, though, that's where the affected party piece comes in, because then automatically it's going to come to you. So if the 2 adjacent are not happy with it, then you're going to see it no matter what.
Correct.
And even if the neighbors say, we saw one within the last year where they were proposing to do, was it?
You might see it.
Were we still on the same panel
Backyards to
together and it was
backyards.
Oh, the big one.
raised up, you went
Raised.
down and back up, and
It was a very interesting design, but it was.
that wouldn't
You'd wanna
have,
make sure you
stayed at
screened
staff
it
level, right?
appropriately.
That would have, in any case, because I think the neighbors weren't objecting to it, I
No,
can't
the neighbor
remember.
was it.
Oh, maybe it was.
So it was at a panel review.
But let's assume that the neighbors didn't, they just signed off.
Right.
But because it wasn't tucked up against the house and wasn't,
Hot tub thing?
it was unusual design, that would have still come to us, even under this change.
Chance to.
Change.
Well, yeah, I mean, the location.
Talks about the location.
How many hot tubs do we
addressed
get a
in the
year?
guideline.
How many hot tubs do we get a year?
I don't know, I could probably run a report and get back to you on that if you really want to know.
Is it 5, 6, something like that? 100?
I don't know off the top of my head, I don't want to guess.
I can't imagine it's more.
But, they come up often enough, and it's just identified as something that's fairly simple. And,
They always are until they're not.
Yeah, right, that's the point.
Unless there's an affected party.
So, yeah, the easy ones you can have.
I live
How do you rate that in a guideline? Staff will review easy
So if I put
applications.
my hot tub on my deck and the lake is my backyard, do I have to notify the neighbors across the way?
The ones with binoculars?
Currently, no, we would not require you to notify your neighbors across the lake.
Maybe this is where the 500-foot rule comes into play.
Right.
That's a good
The
point.
hot tub?
25 people.
Okay, so maybe we can just get a little direction. You would like to know how many we do of these?
Because this would
Yeah.
probably apply to, I don't know why we didn't pull the single family, the single family one might read differently.
Yeah.
Some of these things, I think, kind of going on off what Neil was saying is, who wants to take the responsibility? And a hot tub has some possibility of causing some conflict. Whereas a roof color, maybe not so much. But things like this, I think, can pit neighbor against neighbor. Not, if you guys want that responsibility, have people screaming at you instead of at us.
But then it's
Maybe
coming to
that-
us anyway.
They would be
Yeah.
screaming at us if you had approved it too, probably, if their neighbor decided
Yeah.
they
I think
didn't
it's
like
inevitable
it.
it's coming
To
to
me-
us anyway.
To me, it's more again of the difficulty of rectifying something that went wrong. That's why I would reserve the major roofing and things like that for us.
Basically, I think we're saying, let's keep hot tubs coming here.
Yeah, I think so.
It's like a sunroom or an addition. It's a little bit more thought, I think.
And this is for clusters and single-family houses and so on. Yeah.
Easy stuff doesn't take a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's easy until it's not.
Yeah.
And so I think it's better to have that safeguard in place for this one.
I think that's why they're trying to,
Yeah.
they want to get your opinion on the things that. that would be
Some of the
good,
things
so.
that we feel like you know, are fairly
Absolutely.
easy. So hot tubs you'd rather keep where it is what I'm hearing. Okay. All right.
Any other,
That
anyone
was
disagree with that?
You got 2 out of 3.
good. We finally got a little bit of progress. I'll revise the ones we discussed and then come up with a couple other ideas.
That part of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I was hoping to, or we've been talking about another topic, it wasn't on here, what's our agenda for the year? What are things that we want to accomplish? We talked about all the goals and objectives.
Get a new member. Get a new member.
Yeah.
Or short one.
Well, there you go.
That's my goal for the
Your
year.
goal for the year.
That's my goal.
So I don't know if you guys thought about it, or one of our things we talked about was think about it and come to this meeting with some thoughts and things that you might want to consider. So I was going to throw out 3 things that I was thinking. I know it's getting late and we're probably going to want to go, but so we don't have to decide today. But I'll throw out 3 things and we can go from there. One is the center design guidelines. I feel like those are what do you call them? Not city centers. Urban design guidelines. Number 2, now I'm going to forget what I was going to say. The P&Z, attendance at the P&Z meeting, I think it would be good if we figured out a strategy for having some level of consistent attendance there. I suspect it's going to be hard for any one person to do that, so I think it'd be good to talk about and think about.
Unless it was Richard.
You know, maybe we take turns going, or something like that, I don't know, and then reporting back on what we're hearing. Because I could go to some, but I can't go to all, probably the same is true for anybody.
Neil goes to some, Bruce goes to some.
Shoot, what was my 3rd one?
We get, let's just sign Nick, Graham, Grace, and Ken to the rest of them.
I do well being assigned stuff.
What's that?
I do well being assigned stuff, not
There you go.
volunteering.
Nick, you're responsible.
Is that 2?
Yeah, I was trying to think of what my 3rd one was. I think I wrote
All
it.
meetings by 10.
Yeah, finish all meetings by 10.
You're gonna sound like Rick Perry here in a minute.
Yeah. But, so there's 2. Are there other, I'll think about it in a second.
Education.
Actually, that was the 3rd one. The one thing that I see as a big problem is that the community either forgets or doesn't realize that they need to make applications. So I feel like it's important that we figure out a way, I know we've talked about this,
That's what we always say anyway.
To educate the community and re-educate the community and remind them that they need to make applications.
Community outreach.
Because how many community outreach, right? Because how many applications are because people, oh, I didn't know, I forgot, I didn't realize.
I didn't want.
Well, that's their own fault, right? But if we're communicating with them, then that argument goes away.
We have a DRB dunk tank at the next Reston
Yeah,
Festival.
Before they go down vice chairs. If we catch a photo violation in every household in Reston, eventually people will all have to know about the
Absolutely, late winter, before they go to Lowe's, before spring hits, when they get.
Put up the DRB guidelines in the Lowe's and Home Depot. Say, before you buy a piece of lumber.
You live in Reston, hold it rubber.
You live in Reston.
Put down that blue tarp.
Do this yet.
So, any other thoughts, ideas?
Those are good suggestions.
I think they're wonderful. Yeah.
I go above that. I think they're superb.
Yeah.
Thank you. Glad I remembered the last one. Thanks for the subtle reminder.
Was that a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
I didn't hear the motion, but I like it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, folks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, there is one.
Thank you.
Stay
Thanks for your
cool.
help.
I really want to make comments about Mark Libby's socks.
Oh, I like the guy over here, orange jacket and orange socks. Now that was saying something. You notice
He's
that?
trying to appeal to the architect.
The young architect guy?